This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Election week, Paul, and really we're here not just for Tuesday night, but on through the week, the presidency, the House, and the Senate.
Exactly, Tom. I mean, I'm not sure when we're going to know anything with any certainty, but we'll be here. And the markets are discounting it in here. We got a little bit of a lift to the market here, Tom. The dollar's a little bit weaker here. I'll call that out. The DXY index.
Thank you.
A little bit weaker here. But I mean, some polls showing that perhaps Vice President Harris doing a little bit better. So we'll have to see how this all plays out.
And seriously, not a joke, Bitcoin finally pulls back. And, I not that I know anything about the drift of Bitcoin.
No.
But 70,000 down to 68,000, sort of that ebb off.
Exactly right. A little bit of
turn to the market here. We have a great list. We featured that with Nathan moments ago. Nathan Hager, Karen Moscow, getting you started in the morning. We're going to start with Seema Shah and Kathy Jones, focusing on the markets because that's what we do, economics, finance, investment, international relations. But yes, we turn to our heavyweights in politics. There's been a David Gura sighting.
Really? He's
in Pennsylvania. He's in Philadelphia.
Cheesesteaks.
So, we're going to talk to David Gura. We're going to do that before a conversation on the nation's election eve with Bob Woodward. We are thrilled to have Mr. Woodward with us. The book is War. You know what? We're really not going to talk much about the book. We're going to talk about where Mr. Woodward, after his countless efforts in journalism, where he sees this nation heading Republican and Democrat. Greg Giroux with us as well. And we're thrilled to bring in the 8 o'clock hour, Terry Haynes, and the 7 o'clock hour, this hour, Henrietta Treyz will join us. From the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Good morning. Yeah, and Paul was saying it, the dollar weaker. Treasury's also on the rise. After weekend polls, they showed that Kamala Harris gaining ground over Donald Trump. Want to check into with shares of DJT. They're down nearly 6%, and this is all ahead of Election Day. We have NASDAQ futures up about 0.1%, 36 points. Dow futures, little change, up about 40 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, about 12 points. So we have the two-year yield, 4.15%. That's down 5 basis points. We have the yield on the 10-year, 4.27%. And that's down about 10 basis points. To currencies, have to point that out. You see the dollar weaker, Japanese yen stronger at 151.62 against the dollar. We have the euro stronger, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin, down 0.5% at around 68,000. Shares of Nvidia, they're up more than 2%. Well, the reason why, the chip maker is going to replace Intel in the Dow Jones Industrial Average on Friday. Intel shares down 2%. And we can't forget Sherwin-Williams will replace Dow Incorporated as well. Those shares up about 4%. And finally, shares of Apple down 0.5%. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway continued its sale of shares in the iPhone maker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Paul.
Yes.
Sherwin-Williams.
I know. It's a paint company. It's back, baby.
$23 billion in sales, maybe $24 billion if they can get it done in the next year. They get 5% of the sales of Apple. Mm-hmm. They got a very lovely income statement. They bring 12 cents down to the bottom line, maybe 13 cents. Free cash flow, going back pre-pandemic, is sort of churned. But there it is. We have to get somebody on from Dow. How do you pick? NVIDIA we all get.
Get it, yep.
And I guess they can't pick a 6 or 7 tech company. It gets too techy, but...
$90 billion market cap, Tom. Stock's up 15% year to date, up about 40% over the past 12 months.
Yeah.
So
there it is.
Paints.
We begin an eventful, need I say, an historic week, and we start strong. Seema Shah with his chief global strategist, principal asset management. Seema, this is going to be my main question for the day. I have an opinion. I guess I'll sneak it out here through the week. Should investors worry about an election or be blind to the politics?
Hi, Tom. I think this is a question actually that all investors are asking themselves as well, so it's a pertinent one. Look, traditionally, no, investors should look through election noise. There'll always be a ton of volatility, but ultimately what drives markets is going to be the key fundamental of earnings, rates, and inflation. This election, however, I think it has the potential to be fairly momentous in that there are concerns around inflation. We have bond yields hovering almost, they were heading up towards that 4.5% level, which could be somewhat dangerous for equities. So I think there are risks. What I do anticipate, though, is that there is going to be really, really, even more so than we have currently, more elevated market volatility over the coming months. And then probably as you get into 2025, some market realization starts to set in that actually there's not so much space on either side to do much on the fiscal, on the regulatory side. So maybe it starts to fade out. But certainly the next 3 months, I think, are going to be pretty tough.
Seema, I did a major folks Paul, are you able to ask questions after what Penn State did inside the 5-yard line?
No.
This weekend?
Another rough
Are you
weekend
here?
for the Penn State folks. Dan Ives, we'll try to get him on this week. Not so much about his tech call, Tom, but about his Penn State
Please
call.
continue. You're a trooper.
Seema, talk to us about earnings here. We're kind of another big earnings week here to kind of finish it out a little bit here. What have you seen so far as earnings go? And are they good enough to support this market?
So I think, generally the results have been okay. You've seen a bit of a downgrade in terms of estimates as we've gone through, but they've generally been okay. I do think it's been enough for the time being to keep the market going. But when you have yields at this level and potentially higher over the coming weeks, then really becomes even more important that earnings do deliver. We generally think that the economic backdrop is pretty solid. We think rates cuts are going to come through, at least a few of them. But at these kind of levels when valuations across the market are pretty stretched, we absolutely need to see these companies presenting pretty strong earnings. So I think the jury's still out. So far, okay, but we still, as I said, need to see that come through.
So how do you think about this here, stocks, bonds, Seema, here? Because you're mentioning yields. On 2-year Treasury, an investor can get 4.15% here today. How do you think about stocks, bonds here as we think about 2025?
So we're still fairly risk on. We are expecting equities to do okay, right? So positive returns, nothing like what we've seen over the past year or so. Those kind of returns, I think, are long gone. And partly the reason is, despite the solid backdrop, and we would expect earnings to continue to be okay, valuations just mean that there's just not that much space. It does mean for investors it becomes increasingly important to look beyond just the index, but what are the sectors that maybe haven't seen as much love and have that potential to rally and to make up that catch-up trade. And on the fixed income space, we still like credit, but we're looking really at the safer areas of IG and preferred securities.
But Seema, the heart of the matter, and looking at the weekend zeitgeist, the gloom cruise out on Friday as they always are in that, we've seen a 3-year price for being in cash and not participating. How does Seema Shah participate in the market, given an election, if you're scared stiff?
So I think this is key, is that you have to look through. We started the conversation this way as well. You almost have to look through the volatility and look at what is going on in the macro space. And I admit the concerns around inflation and what the impact could be to the Fed path is important. But because we're not expecting there to be much movement for whichever administration comes in to do anything major on the fiscal side, we should then refocus on what is that fundamental impact of an economy. Is it a solid economy? Yes. Do we think the Fed is going to continue cutting rates for at least a couple of months? Yes. And so from that perspective, it still makes sense to be risk on, but you do want to be looking for the opportunities. It's not just that everything is going to do really well, because valuations are still quite stretched.
Seema Shah, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate it. With Principal Asset Management today, as we look at the markets and the reaction here to this election week. And Paul, I really want to emphasize this. It's not just about the presidential election. I'm as guilty of that as anyone. Harris, Trump, Harris, the endless punditry and that. Aaron Covey, this gets ready for Greg Giroux later in the show. Cook Political Report has 22 toss-up seats in the House.
Yeah.
And Lisa Mateo has to follow all 22 seats.
Exactly
election
right.
night.
So we've got the Senate, we've got the House, and
some in New York.
The White House. Yeah, exactly right. New York will be a big state as well, as it tends to be. So a lot will be decided over the next, we like to say the next 24 hours, but probably a little bit more longer than that.
Wyoming is solid Republican.
Okay.
Didn't know if you knew that.
Yeah, I think I heard that. Yep.
There we are. We'll have a lot more coverage. We are thrilled. Henrietta Treyz, Terry Haynes with us here within the next 90 minutes. Futures up 10, the VIX 22, an elevated 22. 0.43. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa, the presidential campaign comes down to a final push on the eve of Election Day. Kamala Harris will spend all of today in the critical battleground state of Pennsylvania. Yesterday, the vice president spoke in East Lansing, Michigan.
This year has been difficult, given the scale of death and destruction in Gaza, and given the civilian casualties and displacement in Lebanon.
During a campaign rally in Macon, Georgia yesterday, Donald Trump encouraged his supporters to vote.
We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. You watch. It's going to be so good. It's going to be so much fun. It'll be nasty a little bit at times, and maybe at the beginning in particular, but it's going to be something.
Today, the former president makes 4 stops in 3 states, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Music legend Quincy Jones, who worked with recording artists such as Michael Jackson and Frank Sinatra, has died. Jones was a legendary composer, band leader, and record producer. Jones helped breathe new life into movie music with infusions of jazz and soul. His landmark 1989 album, Back on the Block, was chosen Album of the Year at the 1990 Grammy Awards. In 2012, Jones was honored with the ASCAP Founders Award. At his acceptance speech, he had this advice for future musicians.
Don't stop till you get enough, man. And I'm saying when it rains, get wet. When it rains, get wet. Work hard, work your butt off, and party hard. That's all I can say. And live your life.
Quincy Jones, who worked with such greats as Michael Jackson, Frank Sinatra, and Ray Charles, was 91. At least 10 people have been killed by an erupting volcano in Indonesia. Trees and buildings were set alight by a cascade of lava and blazing rocks. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Busy election week. We've got to get in here. You know, we've had a lot of baseball talk. I mean, we were Yankees free this weekend.
Yeah.
Which was good. There were some hilarious Yankees costumes in a marathon. Not in the front, not the first, 100 people. But how long did you last? You did okay?
Yeah, I did fine.
It was a cold day. It's perfect for the
Wait. You were in the marathon?
No. Oh, yeah.
No. Oh, man.
I took 7 minutes off my time. Mrs. Keene goes, "What? That's outstanding." Exactly. I go, "Yeah, last year it took 23 minutes to cross Fifth Avenue, and this year it took 16 minutes to cross Fifth Avenue."
Here's my $20 to buy the Brooklyn Bridge, by the way. Here you go.
Yeah, exactly.
What a great event. And I tell you, I
day.
took a little video. It's out there. But the people, the tens and tens of volunteers, and, all kidding aside, Lisa, I think you're the only one in the room cut and chiseled. The way that they grabbed for water, it's not funny. The way they got the cups, and they're all over Fifth Avenue, and there's hundreds of people, and it's all, ooh, and, the stupid cheer and all that. But the way those runners at that point of exhaustion grab for that
I've done
cup
it before.
of water.
That's why I used to carry my water on me. I didn't even go for the guy who used to
You did a marathon?
Just one. I will never do it again after New York
Where
City.
did it start hurting, Lisa Mateo? What mile?
After the Verrazano Bridge, right in the beginning. That
Mile
way
2?
uphill. No, but it was good. And a shout out to the cleanup crew, too, because it is just the streets are just a mess after, and they get it cleaned up just like that.
Good morning, 92.9 FM Boston. We're thinking next April, Lisa Mateo running the Boston Marathon. Nice tie-in to all of you up in New England. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by BAM Mutual. BAM Mutual insures municipal bonds and finance essential infrastructure and provides guaranteed income to improve any portfolio. Be part of building America. Invest in BAM insured bonds. I did that right, Paul. There you go.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I got to put a little more emphasis into it. Futures on the rise. This is after Wall Street's gains on Friday. That was following those robust earnings from the likes of Amazon. So right now we have NASDAQ futures, little change, but up 14 points. Dow futures up 30 points. We have S&P futures up about 9 points. We have the two-year yield, 4.15%. That's down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.28%, and that's down about 10 basis points. To commodities, right now we have oil on the rise. Brent crude up about more than 2.5% at about $75 a barrel. WTI crude $71 a barrel. Taking a look at spot gold, it's at $2,741 an ounce. Today's a big day for Boeing. Members of the union voting on a tentative deal for a contract to end a nearly 2-month-long strike today. And then delivery delays from Boeing, well, that's pushing Ryanair Holdings to cut its passenger growth target for the year. Their ADRs right now up about half a percent. And other companies making news, restaurant chain TGI Fridays filed for bankruptcy protection.
I worked there
know.
for a time.
You did.
Did you work
Bartender,
there?
Richmond,
After
Virginia.
McDonald's, they threw you out at McDonald's?
Richmond, Virginia, during college.
That's a learning experience.
Really?
What was your key?
The number of drinks you had to learn was just stupid.
Too much.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, can I just do a gin and tonic and let's call it a night? No.
There you go.
Yeah.
Did you have to wear like the black and white stripes
Oh, yeah.
and all that?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Oh, for a photograph.
I love
I
it.
got some stories about
too.
ladies' night, Lisa Mateo.
Ooh, at TGI Fridays.
Richmond moms. I'm just saying, right there.
I love this.
This is a family show, Mr. Sweeney. We say good morning to all of you across this nation. On YouTube, we're making a major push this week, this election week, on this new distribution. I can't say enough about how ignorant I am about the modern digital distribution and the success we're having on YouTube. Yep. Paul, it's Bloomberg Podcast. You go out, you subscribe, and all I can say is it's building, and I'm shocked at the international effort. Good morning, Mexico City. Good morning over in Singapore in the evening on the Pacific Rim. On your morning commute, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, on Spotify, on Sirius. A lot of people out on Sirius. I misjudged that as well. And, of course, 99.1 FM in Washington, 92.9 FM Boston, and in New York City. She's just in from running a marathon, Bloomberg 1130 a.m. Kathy Jones joins us right now with Charles Schwab. You know, I was looking for you yesterday. Have you ever run the marathon?
No, I've watched it because I live
very good at watching.
Just east of First Avenue, so you can go out and you can watch it and you can wave your sign and hand out water.
Lisa, make the marathon noise. What do they say? Woo!
Woo! And then you tape your name to your front so they scream out your name. It's the best.
Okay, there we go.
It's a fantastic event, but no, I've never been tempted.
Right now, my chart of the year is price up. The bond market recovery of the last 18 months, to me, is more important than the equity market. Recently, we've seen a pullback, price down, yield up. What is the permanence of these new higher interest rates?
Yeah, I think they're impermanent. Rather than use the word transitory, I'll say impermanent. But I think we've been on this roller coaster all year. You know, we came in with yields dropping, anticipating 4 or 5 rate cuts this year, then got the spring rebound in economic activity, and yields went back up, we come down, we go back up, and this is all largely driven by growth expectations that translate into changing expectations about what the Fed can do or can't do.
So in addition to an election Tuesday, we have a Fed decision this week as well. What do you think the Fed's going to do?
I think they'll go ahead with the 25 basis point cut that they'd signaled.
Okay.
Largely because they've signaled it.
Yeah.
And they don't like to surprise us too much. After that, I think you could make the case for a pause. We've had better economic data. The jobs numbers, particularly with the revisions, indicate the labor market's in better shape than when they cut in September. So I would think that it could be possible we'd see the forward guidance be a little bit more pause-ish, to coin a new phrase. That
right.
They may just say, well, we're open-minded after this.
So In the fixed income space here, I mean, again, a lot of folks, I think, would probably feel pretty comfortable sitting in the 2-year Treasury at 4.15%, 4.2%. Should we be taking credit risk? Because I know high yield has actually been the best performing fixed income sector this year and last year.
Yeah, high yield's done extraordinarily well, better than we actually anticipated, because those spreads have really come in a lot and persistently continue to come in. But you are seeing at the low end of high yield some underperformance by the weaker credits. So be pretty cautious there still, just because you're not getting a lot of extra reward for the risks that you're taking spread-wise. We like investment grade, even though those spreads are really low. We're seeing corporate profits continue to do well, and a lot of cash flow on in the earnings reports. Balance sheets seem to be pretty healthy, so that can continue to move.
At Charles Schwab, you get to see, I mean, you just have such a huge account base at Charles Schwab, retail investors. What are retail investors doing in fixed income space? Are they sitting there in their CDs? Are they taking credit risk? Are they, what are you seeing from the Charles Schwab account holders?
We've seen a gradual migration out of just very short-term, T-bills and CDs, and moving out the yield curve. But it's been gradual. It hasn't been all at once. It hasn't been a heavy kind of push. It's just been a gradual where people look at the yields and they say, 4.5% or 5%. Depending on the amount of credit risk I'm willing to take, is okay for me, and I'll ladder it out over the next 5 to 10 years and sit on it. They're pretty comfortable with that.
On a standard deviation basis, we cratered -6.5 standard deviations, depending how you measure it. We haven't come halfway back, but we've really come back nicely from the long-term trend on price. We're still -3.x standard deviation. Do you just assume a linear trend of recovery here, and out there somewhere we get back on trend?
Yeah, I think we will get back on trend. I don't know that it's going to be linear. I think it'll probably be more of a roller coaster to get there. But once you have the coupon income, then your total return gets to be very positive, right? The problem in 2022...
She read the yield book.
I know.
Sidney Homer. She read every word of it.
I did, What else do you do in your free time? So
that was a worldwide nerd alert there with Kathy. So let's continue, please.
Kathy, are there some sectors that you like out there that screen well for you guys as you think about corporate credit?
There's nothing that screams this is a great bargain, but we also don't see a lot of real bad credit sectors. A little bit concerned about consumer discretionary, where you see a little bit more leverage and vulnerability. But all in all, most sectors look pretty good. Again, we watch those corporate profits, all-time record highs. It's really hard to argue.
Kathy Jones, thank you so much. With Seema Shaw, Kathy Jones getting us started here in the markets in this election week is, well, Paul, I'll mention this in the 9 o'clock hour when I bring in Bob Woodward, but someone in the home this weekend had not watched All the President's Men.
Really?
So, we're watching. I said, I'm interviewing Bob Redford.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So he'll be here.
They're like, really? I'm like, well, no, not quite Bob Redford.
That was
Bob Woodward.
That was peak newspapers, I think.
It was. That's really extremely astute way to put it. Yep. And everybody went to journalism school.
Yep.
And they wanted to smoke in the newsroom like Dustin Hoffman. I mean, that's.
Yeah. But we still get great journalists coming out of some great journalism schools, Northwestern, Missouri, Carolina. I mean, there's some great journalism schools out there, and they continue to come to Bloomberg News.
Yeah, we're looking at Penn State for those offensive linemen to line up better than they do in journalism. A little disappointing weekend,
but we can still salvage this season.
I can't get used to college football being so blatantly about betting and everybody's into it.
Everybody's into it.
It's moved like beyond me.
No,
I'm not critical.
No,
but I just don't get it.
No, but it's just, and again, as recently as 5 years ago, the NFL would get nowhere near betting. Now they have a franchise in Vegas. They're all in partnership. The Walt Disney Company family, now ESPN is all about the betting. So it's everywhere.
Unfair question with 21 seconds left. How big is NCAA football versus the NFL?
It's a lot smaller, but it's big. I mean, it's big in money. And it's really big.
We'll talk about that through the season. There's lots to talk about here. It is election week. Look for our special coverage Tuesday night.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, investors, they have plenty to watch for this week outside of the presidential election. On Wednesday, the Fed kicks off that two-day meeting on interest rates with a decision on Thursday. Today, we have a look at factory orders, followed by ISM Services Index tomorrow. Also this week, we have initial jobless claims, a look at productivity, and also a read on sentiment. Now that we've got the economic calendar covered, let's get to futures, because we're seeing the start of a mix right now. NASDAQ futures down 13 points, Dow futures down 15 points, S&P futures up about 3. We have the two-year yield at 4.15%. That's down 5 basis points. A yield on the 10-year, 4.28%. That's down 10 basis points. To earnings we go. We'll start with Marriott. They're down more than 3%. Third quarter results, missed estimates, weaker demand weighed on the hotel company. And then this week, we're also beginning hearing from a number of companies, including Goodyear, Yum Brands, as well as Toyota and Honda. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. David Gurr will be with us later on. He is in Pennsylvania, a swing state. Terry Haynes in the 8 o'clock hour, and joining us now to get right to it, Henrietta Treyz with Veda Partners. To have Henrietta Treyz and Terry Haynes back to back is what we do at Surveillance. Henrietta Treyz, Axios talks about a 76-day interregnum, whatever it is, to inauguration. Our Greg Giroux, who will join us later, says, brace yourself for days of waiting. You are an expert on the white marble of Capitol Hill. Are you focused on the House or are you focused on the Senate?
Well, I think the House is going to take at least a week to get resolved. We have a toss-up race all the way out in Alaska where it's going to take ages to get those ballots counted and then reported back. So I'm expecting the House to take a week, but I'm really optimistic on both the White House and the Senate side that we'll have an understanding of where the race is on Wednesday. I mean, in all honesty, we just need to know how a couple of districts are looking in core states like Georgia, which will start reporting out at 8 p.m. for a new law that they just passed. So I'm optimistic, certainly more optimistic than most for some reason, that we'll have a solution or an answer on the president and Senate pretty early on.
Interesting. So, Henrietta, talk to us about turnout here. A lot of folks are suggesting that this is going to be a key issue, that turnout is going to be really, really important here. Can you explain to us why that is, and does anybody have an advantage there?
Yeah, absolutely. Turnout, I anticipate, is going to be close to 2020, which was a record-setting year, but not exceed 2020. So many people were eager to vote in 2020 at the pandemic time horizon. We had so much early voting. So I don't think we're going to exceed that. That's generally, I think, consensus. But I do expect we'll beat 2016. And the story for me is really the suburban voters. They are the largest demographic that voted so far. And the votes that turn out there are sending flashing signs for the Trump campaign. They've effectively sacrificed their queen with the suburban voters, which they won in 2016 and won the election, and then lost in 2020 and lost the election. And right now, Kamala Harris, per the latest Ann Selzer poll in Iowa, of all places, has her winning the suburbs by 23 points.
Henrietta, more than anyone we talk to, you know the machinery. This weekend, I inflicted upon the family, even Vet Bill and Kennel Fee had to watch, the candidate. Robert Redford, toothy and blonde, is a California candidate, and he's surrounded, led by Peter Boyle, by the machinery of politics, which Henrietta Treyz is doing. What is the machinery of politics right now doing? They're waking up, they're having their morning tang, and then what does the machinery of politics, like in the movie The Candidate, what do they do in the next 48 hours?
The next 48 hours is all campaigning all the time. Every surrogate from both sides is fanned out across Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, all the swing states right now trying to turn out votes. I think the fact that both Trump and Harris are going to be in Pittsburgh today, and then Harris is moving on to Philadelphia, signals just how critical that race is for her. And in my forecast, she wins Pennsylvania. And Donald Trump really doesn't have a path to victory, even if he pulls back Nevada and Georgia.
So in the candidate, like when one candidate puts the door thing around the doorknob, vote for me, and the other team follows on 10 minutes later and takes that doorknob thing off and puts their... Have you ever done that, Henrietta?
I've done that many times, from Texas to Rhode Island. Yes. Not that I didn't steal the door knocker, but I've done a lot of campaigning.
Henrietta, just do you personally, I mean, from your perspective, when clients ask you right now, today, who do you think wins the presidential election?
I'm at 60% for Kamala Harris. I have been there since mid-September. The national averages started moving outside the margin of error in a way that made me comfortable, and which I anticipate it has continued. So as long as it's +3, which it is in some of the Bloomberg and Morning Consult polls on the national scale, when you look at the swing state data and it says 48-48, that's not adding value. The most important thing that has come out in the last couple of days is the reversion back to the mean amongst the Black electorate. Kamala Harris is pulling in now 84% of that demographic. It is notoriously hard to pull, and they've had her in the 70s all cycle. I didn't expect for that to stick, and lo and behold, now that we're here 24 hours from the event, it's not stuck. And I think Kamala Harris has the largest coalition.
You and I are getting teary-eyed over democracy. Someone grizzled like Henrietta Treyz, it's the event.
It's the event. So, Henrietta, if in fact it were to be a Harris victory, and I don't know how close or whatever, what are the avenues for former President Trump to challenge this? Has anything been tightened up since last cycle, or could it be state by state, just challenging every kind of vote and count?
Yeah, I mean, there's already lawsuits that have been filed. There are endeavors from Pennsylvania to Georgia to Arizona to try to, either overturn some of the ballots that have been returned, or to somehow get other folks on or off the polls, to challenge the way that they're operating in the ballot boxes, access, who gets let in, things like that. So there's already going to be, probably hundreds of lawsuits that are filed. To be really blunt, that's a campaign problem. That is not a problem for investors or for the American public. If you want to dispute the election, that's a you problem, not an us problem. So that's the way that I think about it. I know that's pretty aggressive, but you can challenge all you want, just like he has since 2020. But nonetheless, Joe Biden is president, and I expect in the event that he loses, that's how we will all proceed.
We're going to talk to Jennifer Lawless of the University of Virginia here in the 8 o'clock hour. Folks, she, more than anyone in the nation, is definitive on the modern gender gap. Henrietta Treyz, how do you define the modern gender gap versus its advent in the late 60s?
Well, I think the current gender gap is the biggest problem. Women are 52% of the electorate. You could see 53% of the electorate this year. Women vote early, they vote often, they vote in those suburbs. It's the largest demographic that votes as a block. So if you want to slice it into age groups or regions in the country, or suburban or urban, it doesn't matter. When you lose 52% of the population by 11 to 17 points in a given state, you really can't make up the delta. And I think that's where we are right now.
Henrietta, if my father were alive, his GOP, what happened to my father's GOP? If former President Trump were to lose this election, who is the GOP today?
This is the key question, Paul. Thank you.
I think a really good indicator is going to come out of the Senate when we get a vote on the Republican conference chair after the election. I want to say it's the 12th or 13th. The Senate is going to vote on who is going to replace Mitch McConnell. And we know that Mitch McConnell has stood up for sort of the establishment GOP that your dad was a part of. And I assume would find comfort in that zone or that range of Republicanism. And the next step is going to be, is it John Thune, is it John Cornyn, or is it Rick Scott? And I think that's going to be our clearest indicator.
Yeah, but here's the indicator I see, and correct me if I'm wrong, Henrietta, which is highly likely. I see someone like the senator from Florida, Mr. Rubio, and there's all the tapes back when he said negative things about Mr. Trump, and now he's saying positive things about Mr. Trump and that. Thune of the Dakotas seems to be removed from that. I mean, is that, to Paul's wonderful question, is that the future of the GOP, or does Senator Thune have to go out and invent a new party for Paul Sweeney?
Well, I mean, I think Thune and Trump have had a notoriously frosty relationship. It has thawed, from my understanding. But to be really clear, the sort of Trump wing of the Republican Party is now 12, 13, 14 members of the United States Senate Republican Conference, and is the functioning majority or deal killer in the House. So the Republican Party, the establishment side, is going to have to incorporate the Trump wing as we go forward. And if for no other reason, then that's who the voters come out to support. The voters are not coming out in the midterm election years. The Republican Party should have ran away with the House and the Senate in 2022. And instead, what happened? Democrats picked up a Senate seat and held Republicans to the smallest majority of any minority party in decades. So I think the Republican Party as a whole must ignite and inflame those voters and get them to turn out. And they really only turn out for Trump.
I've never read Thune's biography. I've interviewed him a couple times, but the senator, all-star Dakota's athlete, like in 6 sports, that kind of thing. His father, Distinguished Flying Cross off the Intrepid in World War II. Okay. I mean, it's like the anti, in the comparison of people's lives, it's like the anti-Trump to say, at least. John Thune of South Dakota, we'll try to get him on here as we pick up the pieces after Tuesday. Henrietta Treyz, thank you so much. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. I'm sure we'll talk to Ms. Treyz here, as Paul says, along the, 74 days to the inauguration.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just going to keep on giving. Futures are flat. The VIX 22.57. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. On this election eve, polls show Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump in a close race. Today, Trump will campaign in 3 states, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Yesterday, the former president held a rally in Macon, Georgia.
4 years of Kamala and Sleepy Joe have delivered nothing but economic hell for American workers.
Meanwhile, Vice President Harris made a stop yesterday at the Greater Emmanuel Institutional Church of God in Christ in Detroit.
Let us answer then, not just with our words, but with our works. Not just with our faith, but with our feet as we walk to the polls. And let us use our power to advance the cause of freedom, opportunity, and justice.
Today, Harris will campaign all day in Pennsylvania. The music world has lost a titan, Quincy Jones. Jones's legacy ranged from producing Michael Jackson's historic Thriller album to writing prize-winning film and television scores. In an interview with Billboard magazine, Jones talked about helping Jackson's career.
I was looking for stuff when he asked me about the producer to see what he could do that hadn't been done before. I was thinking about the range of his voice and just that's the stuff that you do, like the architecture of production, because he was so smart and intuitive,
He also collaborated with Frank Sinatra, Ray Charles, and hundreds of other recording artists. Jones won 28 Grammys during his career. Quincy Jones died at his home in Los Angeles at age 91. Finally, Saturday's college football game between Georgia and Florida got violent in the stands. First, a fan was tasered over a seat mix-up in the second quarter, and then at the end, officers had to fight the fans. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office says it is reviewing multiple violent altercations. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Let's do this right now. And Quincy Jones, and there's so many ways to go. I'm going to feature later on in the show the Quincy Jones of New York City in the Brill Building on Broadway way back in the early 60s when he was, basically unknown, and what he invented at the Brill Building. But what he did with Michael Jackson was just to do the first album they did, Rock With Me and all that, right. And then it just got better.
Yeah.
Nobody expected that.
I mean, you can't emphasize enough the impact Quincy Jones has done for the music industry. I mean, you can just go on. And the collaborations, as I mentioned earlier, with Frank Sinatra and Ray Charles. I mean, this man was a dynamo.
Yeah, and the collaborative ability. There's a video out of the We Are the World. Yeah. To be blunt, I'm not a fan of the song, but the video is riveting. Yeah. How he advanced collaboration, really like nobody else. We're going to beat it here at the end of the hour, and the collaboration of Beat It between Edward Van Halen, Steve Lukather, and Porcaro, just amazing. I mean, just absolutely original. It is election week. Of course, our special coverage Tuesday night. Joe and Kaylee lead it off 5 p.m. Mr. Farrow and Miss AMH fired up to join at 7 o'clock as well across all of Bloomberg. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red and green on the screen on this day before Election Day. We have NASDAQ futures down 29 points, Dow futures down 15. We have S&P futures up just a fraction, up 1 point. We have the two-year yield 4.16%. That's down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%, and that's down 9 basis points. To currencies, we have the dollar weaker, Japanese yen stronger, up about 0.8% and 151.78 against the dollar. The euro up 0.6%. The British pound up 0.3%. We have Bitcoin is lower at around 68,000. Few companies making news. That's Meta. BFM Business. It says the company will invest more than $5 billion in EssilorLuxottica. That's the maker of Ray-Ban sunglasses, and take a 4 to 5% stake in the company. And Tesla's Shanghai factory, its deliveries unexpectedly slipped in October. Right now, Tesla shares are down about 2%. And finally, shares of Burberry up 6% in London. A report by online fashion publication mistweet that Moncler may be considering a bid for the company, though it's the maker of those pricey puffy coats. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Paul, the marathon, it's like there's annual traditions. I'm out there and I'm looking for Taylor Riggs of Fox Business. She's running. I mean, she does like 6 marathons a year.
All over the world she goes.
Not this year because her child is so out of control, running around the sidewalks, so she had to cancel the marathon. So I show up and the young cherub, 18 months, is wearing Burberry.
Oh, of course.
I mean, that's, that's
Solid.
how Lisa,
Really?
did you and I dress our kids in Burberry? I don't think so. It was like a Carter's t-shirt and you had a backup towel over your
They
shoulder.
grew out too fast. They grew out of it like this.
I mean, Taylor's got the kid head to toe in Burberry's. I didn't know what to make.
Nice.
It's good. Maybe she'll run next year when the kid grows up. We'll have to see. How about this? Let's. It's been so long.
I know.
We did the
forever.
poll. We did the poll, and the poll said less Tom Keene and more Lisa Mateo newspapers.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look at the front pages, the Lisa Mateo Hour. It's brought to you by IBKR Financial Advisor Switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey custody solutions. No ticket charges, no conflicts of your interests at ibkr.com/RIA. Lisa, go.
I know. I forgot how to do this already. It's been too long. But since we're talking so much about election, I figure I'd start here. This is in the Washington Post. It's saying this shift from election day to election season now because more people are casting the vote early. So they see the difference. Quick number check. More than 74 million people have already cast their ballots as of Saturday, and that's nearly 47% the total number cast in the 2020 presidential election. So a lot of people doing it. So the experts are saying it's more, election day has become this more like end to voting rather than kind of the kickoff.
What's your earliest memory of going, your parents and going?
Definitely going into the polls with my parents back in the day. I'm sure my dad just went down the Republican side, right down the thing. That's what he probably did.
My father would pick me up, and I got to pretend I was closing the handle thing.
Yep.
And then you'd watch him click, 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 and maybe you could do one click.
That's what I used to do with my kids. Yeah.
I think with technology, we should know, by 8 o'clock tonight, but why we're doing write-in votes. I have no idea, which I did, by the way. I mailed it in and all that kind of silliness.
Did you vote for Taylor Swift?
Yeah, T. Swift, the write-in. But I just think there's no technology in the whole entire process.
My problem is, where is my relationship with my kids, or frankly with the dogs, if I'm doing a stupid write-in ballot sterilized in the kitchen with a martini in my hand?
Yeah, exactly.
That's not the way we did it.
No.
We're removed from it, Lisa.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of how Black Friday used to be this big thing, and then now it's become
We'll talk to Bob Woodward of the Washington Post about this. What do you got, Lisa?
Yeah. Okay. So why your grocery bill is becoming so expensive. This is from the Wall Street Journal. It really breaks it down because it goes to the distributors, and they're saying that's the main reason, because you have the food companies who are saying higher costs, higher ingredient costs, labor costs. But the companies, a lot of the smaller food companies are saying that it's the distributors, the ones that take the products from the store, from the food makers, they bring it to the store, they sell it, and they ship them, and they charge a lot of these extra fees, like a fee for launching a new flavor, a fee for getting a promotion at retail, a fee for if they supply too much product and it goes bad. There's a spoilage fee that they charge. So a lot of these smaller food companies are saying they're stretched, like they don't know what to do because this is and what they have to do is raise the prices, and that's the reason for it. It's the distributors that are the issue.
Well, the food makers had some nice profits over the last several years because they told you right up front in their quarterly earnings, we're able to raise prices. The Procter & Gamble's of the world, the Coca-Colas, we able to raise prices, and because our costs went up, but the wholesalers, I didn't even think about that. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, private label sales hit record in 2023.
We do a lot more private label than we ever did before.
Yeah.
A ton
You
more.
wonder where that'll be in 3, 4, 5 years. Very good. Next, Lisa.
Okay,
please.
so if you want to learn to talk like a banker, there are a lot of terms you need to
I saw
know.
this.
And this was in Business Insider. Finance speak, Wall Street lingo. So they asked a couple industry insiders who came up with this list of words. So they said, for example, bake-off.
Bake-off,
Has
love it.
nothing to do with
Paul
flour or
Sweeney
eggs.
has been in so many
Bake-offs, exactly right. And if one of my clients had a bake-off, I'd be very upset. No. This is my business. You're my business. We're not opening up to competition. Who was here calling on you every month for the last 5 years?
So bake-off. There you go.
That happens.
Didn't know. They compete to do this, like chosen as an advisor by a client. Color is another one.
Yep,
We're
I
not
learned
talking
that
about
early
pink
on.
or blue. It's this one.
Frank Gehry.
Okay. So it's often used when bankers are asking for more of something, like, I want more color from you. Tell me more, basically.
Information, yep.
More information.
More
More
detail,
information.
yep.
So that's color. Boil the ocean. Have you heard that one?
Nope.
Boil the ocean. Okay, because you can't actually boil the ocean, right? So it basically means someone doing a little bit too much or making something more complicated than it has to be. So no, you're boiling the ocean. Like just break it down. You're being too complicated. So it has a lot of these different terms that are pretty cool. So they want, if you want to be in the loop.
Okay.
So that's what these are.
I used to be in the loop.
You used to be.
I used to be in the
but you
loop.
still know these,
Okay.
the Bake Off. There you go.
You were 6'5", trust fund.
I still have a whole room full of, or desk full of lucite's. Which
Oh, do you have lucite's?
Yeah, I got about 120 of them.
Yeah. They still do lucite's?
I don't know because they don't do. I mean, I just saw an old Wall Street Journal line around that had the tombstone in the work. I mean, that's the first thing you went to in section to see if your deal's tombstone made it.
Tombstone and how big it was.
Yeah.
It was just like variety. And all
exactly.
That. You got anything else? You got
Last
one.
Yes, the
more?
future of footwear is spray-on sneakers.
Come on.
Not sure if anyone in the marathon wore these for 26 2-point miles, but it's a Swiss sneaker maker brand. It's called On. So it made with spray. So basically, it's this new technology. It sprays the upper part of the sneaker onto this foot mold, and it's done by a robotic arm. Okay, so the whole idea behind it is that you don't need to stitch it. It takes 3 minutes to make the shoe, and it could be the step toward automating an industry because the sneaker industry is very labor intensive.
Right.
So it could be a change to the sneaker making industry. They cost you about $300 each, but now they're trying to bring the cheaper options in. But as they start to get this technology going, don't know, it's supposed to fit like a sock. Don't know the support level or anything, but a spray-on sneaker. I don't know.
I don't even know where to begin with this other than I sat transfixed on a bed in Cape Cod at 2 a.m. one night, and there was a new Lisa Mateo, thank you so much for the newspapers. Are we doing this tomorrow? A special election day coverage? Lisa Mateo newspapers?
I don't know. Might be canceled.
It's a game day decision.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. I sat on a bed in Cape Cod a million years ago, and there's this guy, Michael Jackson, who was the Jackson 5, and here was this whole new thing. And of course, Rock With Me and all that. It was all wrapped around Rod Temperton's brilliant songs and disco. And so they sort of said, was Quincy Jones said, okay, can we just do something rock and beat it, like redefine rock, the collaborative nature of it. And there's all sorts of people smarter than me that have said it influenced so many other artists and songs. Michael Jackson with Quincy Jones yelling in the background, "We need to rock, go."
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr. It is an election week. We'll, of course, have all our coverage here really focused on Wednesday morning. Paul, do we have any chance Wednesday morning of saying, and the winner is?
Exactly. I don't know. That's how we used to do it. I'm not sure we're going to get there, Tom. But Henrietta Treyz, I think she was from Fired Partners. She was kind of saying, hey, maybe we will.
Terry Haynes with us in this hour. We put a great list put together. Jordan Rochester is going to join on foreign exchange. He has to put up with Constant and Rashudo now over at
Mizuho.
Yep,
so, nice bank over there.
His job is tougher now than it used to be. Greg Giroux, expert on the granularity. We'll go county by county.
Exactly.
With
street by street with that guy.
This day before the election, we are thrilled to bring you in the late 9 o'clock hour Bob Woodward of the Washington Post. We will look at his book, War, yes, but far more, Bob Woodward, on how far we've come in this democracy. Look for that in the 9 o'clock hour. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, brought to you by Cohn Resnick. Advisory Assurance Tax. Discover optimization strategies that are helping CFOs make their finance function more competitive, more resilient. Talk to Cohn Resnick's advisors. We thank Cohn Resnick for key support. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You've got it. We've got the dollar weaker. Treasuries on the rise. Weekend polls indicated Kamala Harris gaining ground over Donald Trump. Right now, shares of DJT down nearly 6%. This is all ahead of Election Day. We have NASDAQ futures up about 0.1%, 19 points. Dow futures up about 6 points. We have S&P futures up about 10. We have the 2-year yield at 4.15%. That's down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's down 9 basis points. To currencies, we have the dollar weaker, Japanese yen stronger, euro stronger, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down about 0.2% at around 68,000. Shares of Nvidia, they're up just about 2%. The chip makers replacing Intel on the Dow Jones Industrial Average on Friday. Intel shares down about 2%. And Sherwin-Williams replacing Dow Incorporated. Sherwin-Williams shares up about 4%. And shares of Apple down 0.5%. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway continued its sale of shares in the iPhone maker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. On Friday, we were in search of Damian Sassower. Lots going on in EM, and we discovered there's a drought across all of the corridor from Washington on up to New England, which means it's max golf weather.
Oh, boy.
We had a chip. Lisa put a chip in Damian's neck here somewhere in the middle of July. Joining us in studio now, off of the 4th hole at Tamarack. It's great. It's the kind of course my grandfather would play.
Oh, yeah.
Charles Henry Banks, 1929. And I love what they say here, Paul, the description of the Sassower 4th hole. You have ample room to place one's drive in bunkers that could be led astray. 100 yards short of the green are 2 bunkers that pinch the fairway.
Not good.
How's it going in this weather, Damien? It's like perfect golf weather.
All right. I'm going to say, right? I lied to you. I actually did listen to the show on Friday. I listened to Tom Percelli. You know, he tried to talk about Tamarack. He's another member, a good friend of mine. Tom, as we all know, is the chief U.S. economist for PGIM. And look, I felt like he said a lot of interesting things. The market has gotten skewed a little bit too far here in terms of a Trump victory. If you look at what markets are pricing in.
Right.
Close of business Friday, 60% probability of a Trump victory. I think we've come in quite a bit this morning. But look, if you just look at where it's showing up most, it's in FX, right, Tom? It's showing up in FX vol.
So what is your play off the election as uncertainty is taken away?
Well, I think you have to keep your positioning light here. I mean, look, we've been trying to de-risk and scale into this election. I mean, I'm talking from an EM perspective just because the moves, the swings are going to be so great. I mean, I think dollar mex have been pricing in a 4.5%, 5% swing just in the vol vols the day after the election. And by the way, you want to talk about the day after the election? You know, I'm going to be with you, Paul Sweeney, on Wednesday from 10 to 12 here in the hot seat. And you're right, we may not find out by then. If you look at next day vols in terms of what the markets are pricing in, 33% of the vol premium is now, you know, basically the fact that we may not even know what happens between Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday into Friday. And so, you know, I mean, we may have nothing to talk about, Paul. I mean, we may have to talk about Vandy and Miami and the AP Top 25. So
what
and golf.
I mean, are people just parking themselves in the U.S. dollar here or in the Swiss franc, trying for some security, or what are they doing?
Well, I mean, I just think, you know, really at the end of the day, FX is probably, you know, not where you want to be positioning. You probably want to keep that light. I think gold, I think credit spreads should remain more resilient than competing asset classes in this environment. We've seen that. I mean, you would have said equities on Friday, but now you've got the VIX at 22. It's a pretty big move over the weekend. So, look, I mean, you know, if you just look ahead to this week, you know, it's not just about the election. It's also about the Fed. Right. And what's the Fed going to try and communicate? I mean, is a pause in play in December? I think it might very well be. They're not going to say that, certainly. I mean, Tom, you're
in 2016, I was watching Mexican peso tick by tick with Clinton, Trump, Clinton. I got F1 in Brazil this weekend. Is there a South American play off the election?
There is actually. Well, look, I mean, Brazil is going to announce this Thursday, but there's 9 central banks this week that are going to announce. Just one of them is going to hike rates, and that is Brazil. Brazil is going to hike probably by 50 bips. They hiked by 25 at the last meeting. They're going to be at 11.25% on Selzer, Tom. That is a huge, huge move. But really, they're not the only ones that are really kind of trying to tighten in the belts. You also have Peru. I mean, yeah, they're not going to hike, but they're not going to move. They're going to stay on pause after a pretty deep easing cycle. Same with Poland. And so, you know, we are seeing, you know, a lot of these emerging market central banks a bit exhausted with the stimulus that's coming through. And look, I mean, to your point on MEX, I mean, 1 month vols and dollar yuan and dollar MEX are doubled since August, Tom. I mean, that's
signal?
A massive. It just means that a lot of the dollar bullishness has really been priced in here. And I mean, from an asymmetric standpoint, you probably will, you know, if you are still putting money to work in this market, you probably were looking to speculate toward, you know, downside risk in the dollar here. So
peso 20 to what, 18, or can you give me a big figure?
18 is tough. So I'll give you some scenarios here. A red sweep should see a 5% rise in the broad dollar. That's something on the order of 102 in euro dollar, 740 in dollar yuan, dollar yen at 160. But if a Harris win with a split Congress, dollar's going to sell off. You could see euro dollar at 112 to 115.
Do you talk like this at the 19th hole of Tamarack?
I try not to, but they ask me all these questions.
They ask you all the time. Yeah. They're making Brazilian peso. Paul, jump in here and save us.
What do we do with China right here? How do you position China in your market, in your world with emerging markets?
I mean, I think China's solution here fundamentally has been to extend and pretend. I mean, they're just shifting debt around, Paul. You know, I mean, they're basically swapping local government financing vehicle debt to the banks in the hope the economy can grow its way out of this malaise. But they have some very serious structural problems. We're talking about real estate. We're talking about productivity. But I think from the rest of the world, because you're not really going to play China directly here, the beta of China to the rest of the world has been much weaker than in years past. And I think that's a very notable, and we've been doing some work on this, and you know, the impact that euro dollar is going to have off the back of this election, I think, is going to be far more indicative of where the next 4 years are headed. And so, you know, we talk about the Trump trade, we talk about maybe a 10% broad tariff, or is it just going to be 60% on China? The verdict is out, and that's going to have a real impact. But that volatility is why I think most investors are probably staying away from China at this point. It's just so uncertain.
Are they embracing Mexico for that same reason, maybe? Kind of the onshoring, friendshoring, that kind of thing?
I think Mexico has been, a whipping boy for the broader EM complex. It really has been a bimodal outcome for emerging markets via the FX channel, Paul. Just in the fact that, look, if we are indeed playing for a Trump victory, a stronger dollar, EMFX is going to take it on the chin, and they have. But you're right. I mean, Mex peso now, at 20. I mean, we're almost at 20. Maybe we've come through it this morning. I haven't checked, but it's really sold off in a very short period of time, and there's probably some upside there.
Okay, cancel the golf talk. Miami's 4th in the country.
That's correct.
Who guessed this?
No, but well, look, they had a very clear path in the ACC. It's a very weak division, obviously, a very weak conference, rather. And so, they have a clear path to the quarterfinals. They're going to get a bye in the first round. But what's really interesting,
they got a bye this weekend.
Vanderbilt University, freaking anchor down here. I'm an alumni. They are basically going to qualify for a bowl. They're actually the only team with 3 losses that are in the top 25. So, from my perspective, you got to anchor down here. You got to be looking at Vanderbilt.
When did Vanderbilt become a powerhouse? All they were good at were there was
economics,
social and party, and
no,
the girls had BMWs.
It's an Ivy League. It's the Harvard of the South. We studied really hard down there.
Beautiful campus. I just visited recently. Awesome.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, Nashville's great. I mean,
but
Las
how do you
Vegas.
compete in the SEC? Like, you guys should be in the ACC, and Florida State should be in the SEC.
I mean,
if we're doing all this realignment stuff.
And UCLA and Oregon, should they really be? I mean, forget about what's going on here. So, I mean, look, I think, you have to really shift your attention to the New York Knicks, because really that's where the fun is going to be.
Thank you. I have to study it.
Knicks. All right, they're back.
No, I'm excited. It's going to be a good basketball season.
Let's round it back to where you're going to be after 10 o'clock today, which is the golf course in Connecticut. The 15th hole at Tamarack looks like a movie set.
Okay.
It's based on his par 3 from England. Have you ever hit a hole-in-one at the 15th?
I actually have come really, really close. It's actually probably the easiest hole on the course, because you can take a nice little 9-iron. You could just dice it out there, but they put the pin in a really awful position all the time. They kind of put it on right on the hill.
You paid them off.
You really got to knock it in. But I mean, I'll tell you, the hole we really have is the par 3 11th, which is a Barritz. I mean, they have a big valley in the middle of the green, so there's really no way, unless you've got your big hitter like Paul here, you have to carry the top end of the green. It's a tough one.
Damien, thank you so much. Damien Selzer here before the election here. Seriously, the impact on EM and what we see in FX. Let's get right to it with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Donald Trump has continued to raise doubts about election integrity and evoked more violent rhetoric in the final days of the campaign. More on that from Bloomberg's David Gura in Philadelphia.
He took a lot of criticism this weekend for a comment that he made, kind of remembering the first assassination attempt made on him, talking about a shooter having to go through the journalists in front of him were they to try again. And the campaign had to walk that back. Just kind of think about this in complement with a memo that we got from the campaign chairman just a couple of days ago, really stressing what he hoped Donald Trump's closing argument should be. And it was a simple and concise one, that being Kamala Harris broke it, Donald Trump can fix it.
Bloomberg's David Gura in Philadelphia, where Kamala Harris will wrap up her campaign with one of 2 star-studded rallies. Quincy Jones has died. Jones's historic career ranged from producing Michael Jackson's record-setting Thriller to prize-winning film and TV scores and collaborations with Frank Sinatra and Ray Charles. And a Jones 1962 hit returned to be the theme of a hit Hollywood movie. Soul Bossa Nova later became the Austin Powers theme. Over the past 60 years, it was hard to find someone in the music, TV, or movie industries who did not have some connection to Jones. Quincy Jones died in his Los Angeles home at age 91. Finally, Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt declared an emergency for 6 counties affected by multiple tornadoes. About 100 homes have been damaged statewide and about 30,000 households without power. Governor Stitt said that they are making sure polling stations are set up for tomorrow's voting.
Tuesday for the polling stations, we're prioritizing making sure those are all up. We'll advise the public if there's any issue there with the polling stations and kind of reroute people if we need to, if that comes.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And Paul Sweeney, the drought that we have is, I think Mayor Adams has been very good about it. It's sort of a kind of drought. It's nothing like the seriousness of California. But a lot of the weather, whether the images from Spain, the tornadoes that Michael Barr mentions in Oklahoma, what we saw with those 2 hurricanes in the jobs report we saw it Friday. There's something going on with the weather. I mean, it's irrefutable.
Yeah, it is. I mean, in South Jersey, they're really concerned about the drought and fires in the Pine Barrens,
in
for
the Pine
example.
Barrens.
Yeah, so we see
John
the signage.
McPhee writing about that years ago.
So as you go down South Jersey, it's definitely a big
What's
issue.
the water? Is the water bath water?
No, the water's cooling. The ocean's cooling down. It's down about 65 right now. So
65.
it was chilly Saturday when I
They had a temperature off Valencia, Spain. The Mediterranean average temperature. You ready, folks? 83 degrees.
Yeah, that's
I'm not sure when that
warm.
was, but there's a little bit of change out there, to say the least. Red and green in the screen from New York City. Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Little movement in futures after Wall Street's gains Friday following robust earnings from the likes of Amazon. Right now we have NASDAQ futures down about 3 points, Dow futures down about 10, S&P futures up about 5. The two-year yield, 4.15%. That's down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.28%, and that's down 10 basis points. To commodities, oil on the rise. We have Brent crude up more than 2.5% at $74 a barrel. WTI crude, $71 a barrel. That's as tensions escalate again in the Middle East. Today, a big day for Boeing. Members of its union voting on a tentative deal for the contract to end that nearly 2-month-long strike. And delivery delays from Boeing, well, that's pushing Ryanair Holdings to cut its passenger growth target for next year. And other companies making news, restaurant chain TGI Fridays, Paul's former stomping grounds, well, it's fired for bankruptcy protection, as well as Franchise Group. Now, they're the owner of brands including The Vitamin Shoppe and Pet Supplies Plus. They've also filed for bankruptcy protection. For on-brand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Paul, you nailed the Boeing strike. The laborers said no.
Yep.
Why would it be different this time?
I don't know. It's. I guess there's a number out there for them, but I would think for a worker that's striking now, you're going into your second month here. This is probably getting pretty, I don't know, dire.
We'll have to see. What a great day here, the day before the election. Bob Woodward with us in the 9 o'clock hour. And as important, Terry Haynes of Pangea. People ask me all the time who has been out front on the punditry and the absolutely endless margin of error or no margin of error idiocy of single point poll analysis. Terry Haynes is led, and he's led by saying that Mr. Trump has a ceiling. Terry Haynes, what is the Trump ceiling this day before the election?
The Trump ceiling, Tom, nationally is still like 47, 48%. And you see that a lot in the swing states, too. I mean, you'd think that if people were going to break to Trump, they would have done it by now. But still, his percentages have been absolutely the same as they've been since June, since Biden was in the race. So, there's little doubt there's a ceiling here.
I mentioned earlier, I was showing someone at home some of the political movies, The Candidate, 1972, Robert Redford. And it's got the whole political apparatus. Mike Barnacle's in there. He's about 18 years old in the movie. Terry Haynes is in there, 12. Mr. McKay. But Terry, that apparatus doesn't exist for Mr. Trump. He's like go it alone. Is that a stereotype, or does he have a political apparatus?
Well, he's got the answer is a little bit of both, Tom. What he's got is he doesn't insource it, if I can use that term. What he's done is he's outsourced a lot of it to outside groups, including Musk, who have tried to build it for him. I think of this as a little bit, not disparagingly, but a little bit of as a 2016 strategy. One of the strikes against Trump in 2016 was, Clinton's got this wonderful organization, and she's going to get out the vote, and Trump, where is Trump? He doesn't have the money, he doesn't have this, doesn't have that, and he's surprised. And a lot of people, and but this time it's not a surprise. And the Democrats had built out a great organization in 2020. They still got that organization recreated this year. It's a much tougher slog for Trump this time.
Terry, what are you telling clients? Who do you think is going to come out on top here on the presidential side?
Listen to you. Unfair question the day before. Continue.
Oh, no, not at all. It's, I told somebody last week, look, I'm in the calls business, and, I don't make them lightly, but people want a call. They don't want it's going to be really tight. They can get that anywhere. I think Harris is 60% likely to prevail. I mean, she's got, I think, organization advantages, voter enthusiasm advantages, and she's got message discipline and message advantages, too. This, you combine social issues and Trump loathing to keep the ceiling on Trump is a pretty potent message. I think on balance, that wins. It's very tight. What I always tell markets, though, is you got to watch Congress. Congress is more important here in terms of policy, and we're at 70% that's a split Congress with a barely Democratic House and a barely Republican Senate.
So, Terry, talk to us about get out the vote here. Is anything going to be unusual this time? Is it going to be higher than usual turnout? Give us a sense of how turnout will be.
Well, I'd look at it this way. There have been, since, take 1996 as a baseline and go, so 2000 is your first like real race, right? If you take that race up to 2020, turnout in the presidential years has increased about 15%. I think it's 14.9. So it's increased overall. And every cycle except 2012 when it went down slightly, and that was a very tight election between Obama and Romney. People tend to forget that, but it's the beginning of what we've got now, these kind of nail biters. I think higher turnout is likely, and I think higher turnout has been shown to benefit Democrats across the board. And you combine that with an organization, and I'll give Harris a bare advantage on that.
Terry, maybe off your remit. I mean, this is Lisa, jump in here and help me here. I mean, Terry Haynes on celebrities benefiting the candidate. Billboard has Lady Gaga, Catherine Perry. Who else? Oprah Winfrey, The Roots, Questlove will be there. Ricky Martin, they're all going to be in Pennsylvania supporting Vice President Harris. Do celebrities work?
I don't think so. I think it helps a little bit on turnout. If you'd like to go see one or more of these folks in the flesh, it's a good opportunity to do it. As a voting driver, though, I don't think it works. And I've seen pretty good evidence that it hurts the celebrity, too. The London Telegraph commissioned a pretty big poll in the United States that showed how people viewed Taylor Swift before and after her endorsement. And she lost support, of course, from Republicans mostly, but still she's a less popular person overall than she was before. And since that's one of the coins of celebrity, I'd depending on the celebrity, I'd be a little nervous about it.
Terry, in a country like the United States, should we go days without knowing who our president is? Should we not have, if nothing else, a technological solution that by 8 or 9 o'clock, I don't care where you are, how you voted, whatever, we're going to know what's going on?
My instinct is yes. And at the same time, what you have to do, what you're bumping up against is the security and the veracity of the voting results. You have a situation where, if the fastest possible way to do this would involve heavy internet connectivity, and that at the same time will make things more suspect. So what states are going to end up doing, and states are in charge of this, as we all know, what states are going to do is err on the side of the privacy and the security of the election instead of the instantaneousness of it.
And now, folks, as we come to the election eve, the famed Haynes gridlock meter. How close are we going to be to gridlock in 24 hours?
Well, you will have pretty much a remixed status quo of either the first two Biden years, which is kind of a bare, all D, all R situation, or the second two Biden years where you had a divided Congress. I tend to push back against the whole gridlock thing. Everybody moans and wails about gridlock, but there's an awful lot of bipartisan agreement in Washington. It may not be what you want, but there's bipartisan agreement that we're not doing anything about fiscal, bad for markets, but there we are. There's bipartisan agreement that we're going to really focus on China. There's bipartisan agreement that we're going to really focus on ramping up defense spending and defense industrial base protections. Lots and lots of things are bipartisan agreements. Where we tend not to get bipartisan agreement is on kind of on basic stuff, basic domestic stuff like healthcare and tech and the like. But that's like performative yammering. Nobody's doing anything about it. So I tend to discount it.
All right. Be careful there, Terry. Bloomberg Surveillance is known for its performative yammering. Mr. Haynes, thank you so much. Look forward to speaking to you literally in the coming days. Hugely valuable. Terry Haynes at Pangea. I can't say enough, folks, about his LinkedIn presence. He's codified intelligent discourse out on LinkedIn as he publishes for his Pangea clients. It's sort of like a churn to the market, Paul, right? It's like
a little bit of red and green.
It's before jobs report, it's before Fed meeting.
Yep, it feels like everybody's just kind of sitting on the sidelines here, looking at the indexes.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Makes sense.
Stay with us. Election coverage 5 p.m. tomorrow night. Joe and Kaylee, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Investors, plenty to watch for this week outside of the presidential election. On Wednesday, the Fed kicks off that two-day meeting on interest rates. Today, though, we got to look at factory orders, followed by the ISM Services Index tomorrow. Also this week, we have initial jobless claims, a look at productivity, and also that read on sentiment. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get to futures. NASDAQ futures, we have back and forth right now. Now we're up about 6 points. Dow futures down 25 points. S&P futures up about 5. We have the 2-year yield at 4.15%. That's down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's down 9 basis points. To earnings we go. Marriott down more than 1%. Third quarter results missed estimates. That weaker demand kind of weighed on the hotel company. And Constellation Energy raised its full-year earnings guidance for more than Wall Street expected, but shares down 8%, and that could be because a top U.S. energy regulator where they rejected a data center power deal that one of its peers had made with Amazon. So that could be affecting shares there. And in other news, we talked about that strike at Boeing. Well, now hundreds of New York Times tech staffers gone on strike a day before election day.
They're on strike.
They are on strike right now. Yeah, that is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. Our economic indicators, all we do here across the week. Great jobs report coverage on Friday. The Fed coming up here on the 7th. It's brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors who are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support and future-ready technologies. Grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to Commonwealth.com to learn how. Okay, Paul, so this is the way it is. It's like the New York Yankees taking Aaron Judge out.
Yep.
The Tots are losing to Aston Villa. I mean, they're just not getting it done.
All right.
And they take Son, the Korean, out. Tots fire it up and crush, I say crush, Jordan Rochester's Aston Villa. I thought he'd cancel on us. Joining us now from Queen Victoria Street, Jordan Rochester with Mizuho, looking at the broader perspective, but of course also his charm on fixed income. Jordan, you're sitting with Dominic Constant and Steve Risciuto. How do you play the election? Where's the Jordan Rochester opportunity?
Well, it's clear to me, Tom, what to do in the next 24 to 36 hours, which is whatever the Trump trades were, do the opposite. And Friday was really painful after NFP because we got a bit of a mess. But broadly speaking, for most of last week and so far today, we're seeing the dollar lower, we're seeing rates rally, the curve flatten, and we're seeing the probability of Trump soften. That wasn't based on the view that Trump's not going to win. It's just what I call the pre-event trade coming to an end, which is we've had this build-up of Trump's odds. We've had a very strong run in the dollar, thanks to the macro as well. But people are going to lighten up into the event risk. They want to take profit and be ready to react because it truly is 50-50. I lean towards saying, Tom, the macro will still say buy the dollar, whoever wins. But we're going to have that knee-jerk dollar lower if Harris wins for you to take advantage of it, or you're going to miss it if Trump wins. Now,
well, Mizuho,
carry on. Sorry, Tom.
Synthesize, Jordan, this is important. Synthesize what Constam is doing in Prosciutto over in New York with what you're doing with London. Does that set you up for dollar resiliency and a higher interest rate regime?
Well, I think with what Steve Prosciutto has been talking about, the US is really on fire in terms of growth, where things are with the labour market compared to Europe and peers. So that's why I think we're going to have a divergent monetary policy story. Maybe the Fed's not going to be raising rates, that's a bit too far of a stretch, but they won't be cutting rates as much as Europe needs to and will do. The UK is kind of in between. So that's naturally dollar bullish. You just then have these tariff policies by Trump versus non-tariff policies by Harris that really widens up to where we get to. So if you have a Trump victory, you're looking at 103 in euro-dollar. That's a big swing from where we are now by year end. Or if Harris wins, you're going to see euro-dollar back to 112. Wow. So it's this huge binary outcome that the two sort of candidates will lead to. But then once we get to those equilibrium points, so let's say December, I think next year is still going to be about US outperforming, even if Harris wins.
So, Jordan, at running the fixed income, commodities, and currencies, what are your clients across those asset classes? Are they hedging themselves going into tomorrow, or they just taking the longer term, saying, I'm not too worried about the near term political? How are they playing it? I think everyone's worried about the near term political because of that gap risk. And I think a lot of people don't want to ruin their year-to-date P&Ls as well. We're just a month or so away from getting to that period where you lock in for the annual reports. So you're seeing a lot of people de-risk. You're seeing a lot of people uncertain. A lot of people saying the words, I don't have an edge in this. The pollsters don't know what it's going to be. The sort of modelers like Nate Silver don't really know what it's going to be. Everything says 50-50. So you're seeing a lightening up the risk. You're seeing business activity slow down. You're seeing volumes slow down. I think that today's one of the quieter days so far in the past week or two. But then everyone's ready to gear up once you know the outcome, because it is an event that's difficult to predict, but still, I think, very tradable after we know who's in the White House. So the dollar, though, I mean, go out 6-12 months. Is there a bear case for this U.S. dollar in your mind? There really is. There is a bear case, and it's one that a few charts say it's there, it's live, which is when the Fed got really dovish on 50 basis points, it's if those impulses come back. And one of the charts that really screams that we've got a problem is the Conference Board's consumer confidence, which asks the question, are jobs plentiful or are they hard to get? And if you plot that versus the United States unemployment rate, it is amazing at predicting where the big turns are, going all the way back, I think, to the 70s. And right now it says that unemployment should be on a 5 handle. Now, COVID's ruined many good charts, and we know unemployment is not on a 5 handle, it's 4.1. So we are far from where that signal is. Is that signal wrong, or is it right, and we've just been staring at it for a while and ignoring it? I think the signal might be wrong. I think this time around, the fiscal impulse in the US and all of the COVID charts that have come to a silent death, I think this might be another one to add on top of that pile. But I might be wrong, and the Conference Board is screaming there's a problem, and that leads to the US outperformance changing, Fed cutting by more than what's expected. So what do you think we're going to hear from the Fed this coming Thursday? I feel like the Fed and maybe the Bank of England as well, if they could, they'd hide under the bed sheets to just get through this week, because it's pretty difficult for policymakers. You've got the Fed, who's got to have questions about, what does the change in politics mean for their outcome, their outlook. They're going to say it doesn't matter. It does matter if you have tariffs with Trump, and it does matter if you have large fiscal. And I think back to 2016, we were at a very tepid stage of the hiking cycle, and when Trump got in, we did see an acceleration in rate hikes. So it could be the case that if Trump gets in, these cuts that we're seeing from the Fed, I think we'll see a 25 basis point cut. There may be doubts about whether they go ahead in December or January. That's kind of where we're at.
Excuse me, Jordan. You're with Mizuho, which means I have to ask about Japan. Is Japan tradable, or is there so much uncertainty, including with the LDP challenges politically, that you can't get a visibility on yen out to the end of Q1 2025?
I think it's very tradable. the politics has been very surprising. Essentially, what we've seen is the LDP's stronghold on Japanese politics has weakened. They're quite likely to be either in a minority government or in a coalition agreement with other parties. And we still don't know the outcome of that. The 26th of November is when an outcome needs to be determined. There'll have to be a vote in Parliament to say if we're going ahead or not. I think what could happen is we might have a coalition partner that leads to more dovish policies on the BOJ, might lead to less hawkishness on the yen, and it might lead to more fiscal spending. So that just all spells dollar-yen higher. The main problem with the politics, though, humans can be flippant, Tom, and if we get to 160 in dollar-yen, do we see FX intervention again? That's when it becomes really untradeable, because who wants to take the other side of the MOF? But I think for the time being, dollar-yen high is easier if Trump wins. When we get to that 160 level, we'll have to have a scratch and think, are we going to have intervention here? I think no. Given the political uncertainty.
Very quickly here, link it into gold. I mean, I know that's off your remit, but if I get a 160 yen, what does that do to gold in the Pacific Rim?
Well, it's the same story. Gold's been one of the largest outperformers this year because of the situation with sanctions risks and tariffs. It's detached from real yields in the US. It used to be perfectly correlated for most part. If real yields and gold split, who's the buyer? And the buyer's been central banks. I think it's something that we're going to see faded, so gold suffers if Trump doesn't win. But it's something that will definitely be a long-term story as central banks are clearly the buyers here, trying to avoid potential sanctions down the line.
Jordan, I got 20 seconds. Does Tottenham top 5 team this year?
No, Aston Villa is. This was just a blip. Even though we lost 4-0 against them last year at home, which I went to that game and decided not to go to yesterday's game for a good reason. What a screamer by Tottenham, I've got to say.
Obligatory soccer talk. We had to do that for New York City after the marathon. Jordan Rochester with Mizuho. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. Futures up 8 with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. With a day to go before Election Day, Vice President Kamala Harris will spend the day in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. Yesterday, Harris made a stop at a church in Detroit.
Church, in just 2 days, we have the power to decide the fate of our nation for generations to come.
Former President Donald Trump spent the weekend campaigning in battleground states. Trump in Pennsylvania over the weekend says he should not have left the White House in 2020. Trump also suggested this while behind bulletproof glass.
To get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news, and I don't mind that so much.
Trump's campaign says he was joking. More than 2/3 of Americans say they feel stressed out or frustrated about tomorrow's presidential election. Psychiatrist Sue Varma recommends shifting the conversation to other topics until the results are known.
There's a lot of group chats that are getting fired up, and I say really limit that and say, hey, let's regroup after the election. Let's limit the conversations that we're having about these really heated topics that we're never going to see eye to eye with.
Psychiatrist Sue Varma also recommends if there is no clear winner on election night, create safe spaces and oasis moments in your day where you shut off your phone for maybe an hour before bedtime. And finally, music legend Quincy Jones has died. In 1985, Jones used his influence to gather together a who's who of great performers to record We Are the World, a charity song that raised money for victims of Ethiopia's famine. The music titan's vast legacy range from producing Michael Jackson's historic Thriller album to writing prize-winning film and television scores. In an interview with Billboard magazine, Jones reflected on his career and his aspirations early on.
We didn't think about money or fame when we started. Not ever. Just be a good musician.
Quincy Jones, winner of 28 Grammys, was 91. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Good morning across the nation on your commute. Before you listen on YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts on YouTube and say good morning on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, on Sirius, on Spotify, all the ways you listen each and every day, particularly on I-80, I should say, Paul, out into the reaches of Iowa.
Yep.
Bob Woodward with us before this election in the next hour, and we've learned, joining us in the top of the hour in 23 minutes, Ann Selzer, who changed the political debate this weekend with her work for the Des Moines Register and her own shop in Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, the polls coming out showing that Vice President Harris may be leading, and so that kind of gets your attention, changes the dialogue a little bit.
Full disclosure, I've worked with Ann Selzer over the years. I can't say enough good, but I speak uninformed. What's important is she sits in the pantheon among pollsters of accuracy, of diligence, and it could be a 3-hour interview, but we're going to bring you the pollster's pollster, if you will, is the best way to do it. She named her dog Margin of Error. Exactly, I don't know what that was about. Ann Selzer will join us at the top of the 9 o'clock hour, and then we'll move on with a look at the market, and also, of course, Bob Woodward joining us this eve before the election. The tape looks like it's somnolent tape. It usually is after Jobs Day on a Monday, but ever more so now into the uncertainty of the election, even with, as Lisa mentioned, millions voting before the traditional election day. Red and green in the screen, NASDAQ up fractionally, the VIX elevated 22.40. From New York City, all of us here at Bloomberg Surveillance, good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red and green on the screen on this day before Election Day. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up 6 points, Dow futures down 18 points, S&P futures up 6. The 2-year yield at 4.15%, that's down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's down 9 basis points. We have the dollar weaker, Japanese yen stronger, euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin lower this morning at around 68,000. Few companies making news. Meta, BFM Business, it says the company is investing more than $5 billion in EssilorLuxottica. That's the maker of those Ray-Ban sunglasses. And it will take a 4 to 5% stake. Tesla's Shanghai factory deliveries unexpectedly slipped in October. That's just shares down nearly 2%. And finally, shares of Viking Therapeutics, they're up 4%. The reason why? Well, it reported promising results for its experimental weight loss pill. Then you compare that with Novo Nordisk, their ADRs down nearly 1%. Eli Lilly down more than 1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it, and really appreciate Lisa Mateo in the business chat. Now, Paul, out on YouTube on the live chat, we're getting some pushback. They're like, what is this, the political network?
Really?
And, you know, I get it, folks. You know, I've done this for a million cycles now. I remember Truman and Dewey, I got the same complaints.
Okay.
You know, look, give us some news on Anaconda Copper. But the bottom line is, folks, we do economics, finance, investment, and international relations, and a lot of smart people are telling us this election matters short term, but also to the future of the earnings stream and the rest.
Sure.
That we look at.
I think so. And a lot of smart people are telling us to obviously take a look at the presidential election, but also the down ballot, the House.
Yeah,
and
you've been
Senate.
great on that. The down ballot, and certainly we heard from Henrietta Treyz, gridlock in order. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, we're brought to you by BNY. BNY's expertise and insights can help clients achieve their ambitions. Visit bny.com. Once again, visit bny.com, and we thank them for their support. A couple days ago, I said to the booking team here, I didn't talk to Eric, I talked to one of the interns, but I said, let's go. We got to get this done. She is expert on the dynamics of the gender gap in America. Jennifer Lawless owns a high ground on this. She's at the University of Virginia. Professor, thank you so much for joining us this morning. What is the size of the gender gap this time around?
It looks like it could be about 15 percentage points. And remember, the gap is just the difference in levels of support between women and men for a given candidate. So it looks like women are favoring Harris over men by anywhere from 12 to 16 points.
What are the single issues, male and female, that top issue? I know you're going to say the economy. I don't buy it. I'm like George Bush Sr. I just don't buy it. What is the male issue? What is the female issue?
Well, for women, one of the most mobilizing issues has to do with reproductive rights. So even if that's not the most important issue when they cast a ballot, it is playing a role in being the most important issue, getting them off the couch, out of the house, and to the polls. And they generally are pro-choice. We've seen this among not only Democratic and independent women, but even Republican women who in red states, when they've had ballot initiatives, have gone out to the polls to vote the pro-choice position. For men, it looks like crime and immigration are those motivators.
Jennifer, when are we going to know who our president is?
If Kamala Harris has an amazing night tomorrow night, I think we'll know pretty early. If she wins North Carolina, for example, or if this Iowa poll turns out to be a bellwether, then it's likely that we'll know within 24 hours. But if the Iowa poll is an outlier, if Donald Trump wins North Carolina, then it could be several days or even a week.
How about down ballot here? When are we going to know that? How is that looking at the moment?
It looks like the Senate will wind up in Republican hands. Again, if there's a huge Democratic surge, it's possible that the Democrats could hold on, but that's unlikely. When it comes to the House of Representatives, though, it's more likely than not that the Democrats will take control.
Jennifer, we are so advantaged on this day before the election, the eve of the election, with our guest list. Bob Woodward will join us about 40 minutes from now. Ann Selzer, who was the news item of the weekend, her decades of experience in polling out in Iowa, will be with us in about 12 minutes. Jennifer Lawless, let's get to Ann Selzer. How has technology changed our democracy, our electoral process? Ann Selzer lives this. Bob Woodward's writing books with a quill like he did decades ago. But Jennifer Lawless, how has technology changed Ann Selzer's world?
It's made polling a lot more difficult, actually. It was always difficult to get people to pick up the phone and say who they were going to vote for. But now, in addition to getting people to pick up the landline, which almost nobody has, you've got to figure out how to poll on cell phones. You've got to figure out how to poll on the internet. You've got to figure out, using technology, who a likely voter will be. And you can reach a broader group of people with a campaign, which puts a broader group of people into that category of possible voters.
I can't say enough, Paul, the importance of this. And Iowa is so distinctive because you've got Des Moines. Sure. And then up top, I believe it is, you got Ames. And you got those two pivot points, but there's a whole bunch rest of Iowa that somebody has to reach, like in the other swing states.
Absolutely. And another swing state, Tom, Pennsylvania. A lot of folks, Jennifer, are really singling out Pennsylvania as a key state here. Do you agree? And how do you think that might play out?
I do think it's the most important state. It's almost impossible to see a path to 270 electoral votes for Donald Trump without Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris can get there, but that would mean breaking up the blue wall, which hasn't happened in a very long time. So Pennsylvania is pivotal. And the campaigns have been there. The candidates have been there. Every single ad on TV or on streaming services is either for Trump or Harris, and they are fighting right until the bitter end. I think if it comes down to a turnout game, Harris has a small advantage simply because she has a ground game like no other candidate has, but it's hard to know.
So what is the risk here as we think about, the days after the election, a January 6th type of event or just an environment like that? I mean, is that something that we need to really be concerned about?
I think it might play out a little bit differently. First, it comes down to what Donald Trump decides he wants to do. If he loses the election, will he concede? Will he say he lost? He's already said he's planning on coming out tomorrow night and accepting victory because he plans to win. So it's unlikely that he will concede. But it might be that in 2024, we'll see the kind of activity that we saw on January 6th at various state houses across the Capitol, trying to convince the state legislatures not to certify the election results once the electoral college members cast them. So that becomes the challenge. I think it's unlikely, given that Donald Trump is not in the White House, that we'll see those events at the U.S. Capitol.
Does the final campaigning matter, Professor Lawless? Is this all done and we're just sitting around waiting for Joe Matthew and Kayleigh Lyons to warble gaily at 5 p.m.? Or does this last day of politics really matter?
In a really close race, it matters. And this is a really close race. At this point, if either side can get an extra 1,000 people out in Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, that could actually decide the election.
Professor, thank you so much. Jennifer Lawless with the University of Virginia. Her work on female in politics over decades is absolutely definitive. Again, Ann Selzer coming up here in 7-8 minutes, and then on to Bob Woodward later in the hour. Paul, can we do some I'll let you pick economics, finance, investment. Mr. Sweeney, what are you looking at on the Bloomberg Launchpad today?
Let's just take a look at the markets kind of here. We are here probably about 36 minutes to the open, Tom, and it's kind of a mixed look out there in terms of the futures markets. S&P futures up 4 points, the Dow down 38, and the NASDAQ down 9. So not much movement at the index level there. In the bond market, Tom, we've got the 10-year pulling in pretty substantially here. It's down 10 basis points. 4.27 is your 10-year Treasury yield. So we'll take note of that. Oil continues to move higher on the commodity space, Tom. We've got about 2.8% higher for WTI crude oil. We're now firmly above $71 per barrel, so some concerns. Gold, up yet again, $2,755 an ounce there.
Quincy Jones, so identified with Michael Jackson, with James Ingram, all that he did in Los Angeles. There was early Quincy Jones, and that was the Brill Building and the magic of New York City. And it's amazing the stories of Marvin Hamlish's dentist gave somebody a song. I kid you not. Leslie Sue Goldstein did better than good. She became Leslie Gore, and it was Quincy Jones' first success.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning across the nation. Our David Gura in Philadelphia, Joe Matthew and Katie Lyons ready for coverage. Tomorrow night at 7 p.m., they'll be joined by John Farrell and Anne-Marie Horton. But right now, in this hour, we drive forward this surveillance conversation. In this hour, Bob Woodward of the Washington Post, yes, on his book War, but far more. Bob Woodward on this moment for the nation, whatever your politics. And in moment, Paul Sweeney, we go to Ann Selzer of Des Moines, Iowa.
Yeah, the narrative, I guess you would expect here, 24 hours before Election Day, kind of changing, kind of sifting. It's a fluid situation.
And the effect on the market.
And the effect on markets. I was just going to pull it up, Tom, exactly. We're not seeing much movement here in the markets here, in the futures market, so we'll stay on top of that.
Key markets insight this morning. Jordan Rochester of Mizuho off the London desk. He frames out euro, a 103, weaker euro, stronger dollar on Trump. He goes to a 112 euro. It goes the other way on a Harris win. That would be stronger euro, weaker dollar. Interesting frame by Jordan Rochester there. Let's get right to it from the Interactive Broker Studios. Our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Good morning. Yeah, we have the dollar weaker. Treasuries on the rise of weekend's polls showed that Kamala Harris was gaining ground over Donald Trump. Right now, we'll get to NASDAQ futures down 16 points. Dow futures down 34. S&P futures up 2. We have the 2-year yield at 4.14%, down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%. That's down 10 basis points. To currencies, we have the dollar weaker. Japanese yen stronger, up 0.7%, 151.83 against the dollar. Euro British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down nearly 1% at around 68,000. Shares of Nvidia, well, they're up nearly 2%. That's due to some changes in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Nvidia will replace Intel on Friday. Intel shares down nearly 2%. And Sherwin-Williams will replace Dow Incorporated. Sherwin-Williams shares up 4%. And shares of Apple down 0.5%. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway continued its sale of shares in the company. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. If you go out I-80, and if you want to know the size of the nation, you get out past Des Moines and you're rocking it. You hit Chicago, you hit Des Moines. There's a sign, Denver, 580 miles.
Oh, boy.
It's like,
yeah, exactly.
Okay, where that sign is in West Des Moines, Iowa, and this is below I-80 and above the Raccoon River, is the Vatican of statistics and polling. Ann Selzer, the Young Turks will say, invented the business, and she changed the national dialogue this week. And Ann, thank you so much for joining us. Full disclosure, folks, I worked with Ann years ago with Bloomberg News, so I just want to get that out of the way. Ann, how has polling changed with the advent of the cell phone?
Well, first, let me say that the industry was invented by George Gallup, who grew up in Jefferson, Iowa. So the Iowa lineage is strong. I'll give you that. The question about cell phones, we didn't really need to dial cell phones until 2008, but now they are a routine part of our practice. That is, we draw a random sample of cell phone numbers and of landline numbers, and it's as easy as it ever once was, the cell phones.
Paul Sweeney and I compare our phones. Paul got 14 calls this weekend. I got 10 calls this weekend. We're not answering the phone. How do you account for that in Iowa as you say Harris could win?
You know, what I like to say is for every one of you, Tom, that is not answering your phone, there's a doppelganger who does answer their phone, and they reflect what it is that you would if you talk to us. You know, I'm kind of teasing there. We have a response rate that is better than the national average. What it says on your phone is unknown caller. So it doesn't say possible spam. It doesn't do anything that might tip you off. And if you do answer, the first thing that you hear the interviewer say is that they're calling from the Iowa poll. And I think I give that great credit for our ability to get a good cross-section of Iowans.
And talk to us about your latest poll. What's it tell you these days?
Well, it was a shock, believe you me. When I went into the office after the first night of interviewing, no one would expect that Kamala Harris would have leapfrogged over Donald Trump into the lead. We had seen her move in the September poll from where we were measuring Joe Biden as the nominee back in June. And this is really just a continuation of that. She now leads by 3 points, I think. I don't have that number right in front of me, and you'd think I would have it indelled in my brain.
Exactly.
The point, 47, 44, right?
So what's driving this strength for Vice President Harris?
And it's a continuation of what we saw in September, which is the difference between June and September were more people, dramatically more people, saying that they were likely to vote. That measurement would be, I'm going to definitely vote. If you just say probably, we don't count that. And that increase accounted for Kamala Harris's bump. So less than 1% of people went for Donald Trump when 13% went for Kamala Harris. And that was the difference between June. It was an 18-point gap in June, a 4-point gap in September. That continues with our October poll, in that the demographics more likely than average to say they will definitely vote or that they've already voted are strong Harris demographics. It's women, it's college educated, it's younger people, it's older people as well. The incidence of voting, if you're age 64 and over, is like 94%. That's a really big number, and she does very well with older Iowans. In fact, she wins by 20 points with Iowa women, and just 14 go for Trump. The margin is 14 for Trump.
If you're joining
One thing to be crystal clear about the importance of older people is older women. Her ratio of win in women age 65 and over is 2-to-1.
Interesting.
That's a huge part of her success.
Ann Selzer with us, folks, of course, iconic with the Des Moines Register and now on her own. She is the pollster that the pollsters study in terms of accuracy in all. We're thrilled to have her here. Bob Woodward with us later in the hour. Ann Selzer, I want to go on. I mean, I get Des Moines and all that, and Ames. Okay, fine. Chickasaw County. I'm 2 counties in from the Minnesota border. It shows all of the political turmoil that Bob Woodward's written about for pushing 50 years here, Barack Obama, and then a huge swing to Trump. What did you learn in your polling about the Chickasaw counties of Iowa?
Well, the Chickasaw counties in northwest Iowa, that's Trump territory. It's just that the margins aren't quite as big. I don't have data down to the county level. I wish somebody would pay me enough money that I could do that. But
so I work on that, okay?
We can look at congressional districts, and this is really fascinating. The first congressional district, which is now southeast Iowa, so it includes Davenport and counties south of that. It also includes Johnson County, which is the University of Iowa. And Marionette Miller Meeks is the incumbent. All of our congressional representatives are Republican. She won narrowly, like by 6 or 8 votes the last time. She's being challenged by a University of Iowa professor, and the talk about abortion has been the critical element of this campaign. The Democrat is leading the incumbent Republican by 20 percentage points. Wow. So Iowa has a 6-week ban on abortion that went into effect this summer. And I think that that's responsible for the big gender gap with women. And I think that's also why Democrats may be doing better this time.
And just from a historical perspective, how representative is Iowa for the overall United States here as you think about your polls and the work you see?
Well, if you're asking me to extrapolate, if it's happening in Iowa, is it happening in Wisconsin, which is people make the assumption that we're very similar. I have made the argument that they're not that similar. Iowa has had a very strong Republican Party that recruited good candidates, got good candidates elected, such that there is only one Democrat elected at the statewide level. And all of our Washington delegation is Republican. Both houses in the state house are Republican, and not by small margins. That's not the same way in Wisconsin. It's a little more mixed there. So I think what Iowa, if it is representative, it is that there is more going on under the surface in terms of the abortion issue, in terms of perhaps Trump fatigue, that is turning this state that no one expected would shift blue into a state that might.
And Selzer, the President Trump went after you this weekend after he didn't like your poll. I believe there was a period long ago where you did a poll that favored Trump, and he loved you then as well. I want you to speak to people like Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr, Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, exhausted by the single point certitude of your racket. When you look at the modern day cacophony of polling, the disrespect or throw aside of margin of error, how does Ann Selzer react?
Well, keep in mind, the margin of error works both ways. So if you want to say that the race could be closer than the numbers reflect, the race could also be equally likely a wider margin for the winner. And people forget that, and it's as though they want it to be close. We say that our best estimate is exactly what the numbers say, and any other estimate, like, well, it's a virtual tie, is an inferior estimate, and that just the highest probability of what's true are the actual numbers that we get. So I get a little, it's a point here, it's a point there, and people are wanting to make meaningful statements about that. I think that's been exhausting in terms of the other polls. So that my poll was not 1 point, and that my poll, now is the leapfrog for Harris. I think people are wondering if it's a canary in a coal mine, and that other states might be seeing similar things happening, but the methods of those pollsters might not allow them to see it.
Paul, get this question in. A listener just emailed in on tariffs.
And curious if tariffs are having an impact on this poll. I'm not sure farmers like tariffs.
Well, when Trump instituted the tariffs, there was concern about it, but he was able to pull some money out of a different part of the budget and reimburse farmers for money that they had lost. So they ended up okay. I don't know that they're eager and excited to go back into a tariff war, because Iowa produces so much in the agriculture sector that it has to have foreign partners, foreign markets for export. And that's been the case since Khrushchev came to Iowa to learn how to do what Iowa does with agriculture. This is back in the 1950s. Wow. So they rely on foreign trade. I think they're probably nervous about it. When we tested tariffs back when they were in force under Trump, the farmers and the rural areas were going along with it. They liked their president. They're going to support him.
Yeah, and we got to leave it there. Of course, I remember your work on Eisenhower Stevenson in the early 50s before Khrushchev showed up in Iowa. She is Ann Selzer. She changed the political dialogue this weekend across the nation. Huge response on YouTube from Republicans and Democrats to her work. Ann Selzer of Iowa. Plain and simple. Bob Woodward to be with us in the next hour from New York City. Slight red on the screen. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this futures report sponsored by IBKR. Markets never sleep, and neither does Interactive Brokers. Discover opportunities with CME Group futures across equity indices, interest rates, FX, energy, and more. Access CME futures around the clock at Interactive Brokers. All right now we have little movement in futures after Wall Street's big gains on Friday, following robust earnings from the likes of Amazon. We have Nasdaq futures down 35 points, Dow futures down 59, S&P futures down about 1. We have the 2-year yield at 4.14%. That's down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.27%. That's down 11 basis points. To commodities, oil on the rise. We have Brent crude up more than 2% right now at $74 a barrel. WTI crude $71 a barrel. We have spot gold at $2,745 an ounce. Today, members of Boeing's union, well, they'll be voting on that tentative deal for a contract to end that nearly 2-month-long strike. And speaking of strikes, today's hundreds of New York Times tech staffers, they've gone on strike a day before Election Day. And finally, Costco reports October sales on Wednesday. Telsey Advisory Group expects traffic to be up, but the average ticket to be lower. They also expect shoppers looking to more discretionary items, things like gift cards and seasonal clothing. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Sandwich between Ann Selzer. Thank you, Ann Selzer, for coming on with us from Des Moines. And Bob Woodward coming up later in the hour. Finally, Greg Giroux. I mean, he's so hard to get, Paul.
I know.
mean, it's just brutal.
He's a player.
He writes ballots for us, I should say, with Bloomberg Government. It's a must-read news, and the granularity's extraordinary. Let me go right there, Greg Giroux. As you say, it's going to be a long time till we get results. The 13th District of California is sort of Modesto. Agriculture, I guess it's Duarte winning by X number of votes the last time around. Is a place like the 13th District, Central Valley, is it ever closer this time around?
Yeah, that's going to be one we're going to have a very late count there. That's a race that John Duarte was declared the winner in the month of December. So it was one of the latest races to be called, if not the latest. It's a district that Biden carried pretty easily in 2020, but Gavin Newsom, California's governor, is not as popular in that area of California. And so it performs better for Republicans down ballot. But I do think Duarte is one of the most vulnerable incumbents facing re-election. Thing is, California has a very drawn-out vote count. They can accept ballots up to a week after the election.
Mr. Duarte lives on a pistachio and almond farm.
Nice.
Pretty cool.
Okay, very cool. Hey, Greg, I don't recall not knowing who my president was and not knowing who is in Congress and so on and so forth after 9 or 10 o'clock at night on Election Day. Why are we now have to deal with days and days and days and weeks before we know certain elections?
Well, we've had extraordinarily close elections the last few cycles, and the governing majorities in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate are among the smallest in history. The Republicans have a net edge of 4 seats in the House, and the Senate is just 51 to 49 Democratic. We also have a lot more voters casting ballots by mail, voting early, and some states have very prolonged procedures for counting and processing those ballots. Some states you can kind of pre-process ballots before Election Day, and then they can count them and release them pretty shortly on Election Day and the day after. But some states do not. So that's why we're going to get some fast counts in some states, but not so fast counts in others.
And I don't know. Again, growing up, I don't recall this being such an issue as it's been over the last several cycles. But it just begs the question, why isn't there a technological answer? Some kid in a garage in Palo Alto comes up with an app that guarantees security so that we can just vote real time and get results kind of real time. It just makes us look like a banana republic sometimes.
Yeah, I think the longer the count is, the longer the voted count is drawn out, I think the more it can kind of lead to accusations like what's going on, or there's going to be, questions about the vote count, even though there are a lot of checks and the vote count is going to be safe and secure. But yes, I mean, I think that's a question we kind of grapple with every 2 years and certainly every 4 years with presidential elections. Why does it take kind of days to get the result? 4 years ago, Joe Biden was not declared the winner of the election until the Saturday afterwards. But we've had some very, very close elections the last few cycles. I think regardless of what happens on Tuesday,
Right.
someone's going to get the loser's going to have at least 200 electoral votes, it seems. But we just have a very decentralized system of vote tallying and counting, and some states do it much differently than others.
Greg, I'm looking at the map from Cook Political Report, Aaron Covey and Wasserman and all that, and this is something you excel at. Gray is their toss-up color. I see lots of toss-up color in the great state of New York, less New Jersey, not Massachusetts. There's some in Iowa. There's some in New Mexico. Forget about it. What is it about the gray in New York State that gets your attention?
It gets my attention because these are districts that voted for Joe Biden in 2020, but voted Republican for the House in 2022, when there was when sort of New York, California were kind of states that zigged when rest of the country mostly zagged. When kind of Democrats made gains after the Dobbs decision and overperformed. New York was not one of those states, so that's where Republicans did better than expected. Lee Zeldin came within 6 points of getting elected governor. Kathy Hochul was not popular. And so the question is, in a higher turnout presidential election year, will New York vote more like 2020, which would be good for Democrats, or more like 2022, which would enable some of those Republicans to hold on to those seats?
To cut to the chase, how does crime or worry about safety play into this?
That's a major issue in the advertising I'm seeing in New York. We see a lot of Republican ads linking Democratic candidates to Eric Adams, to Kathy Hochul, to the migrant crisis. So that's very much part and parcel of the messaging I'm seeing in New York in particular.
Greg, what's the correlation historically between the presidential election and down ballot elections? Can the president really lead, Congress down ballot?
Yes, it's tighter than ever. We see presidential and congressional voting coming into greater partisan convergence, more so than in the past. In the U.S. House of Representatives, 435 districts, all but 23 of them voted for the same party for president in the U.S. House. In the Senate, we have 95 senators out of 100 who are of the same party as the presidential nominee who most recently carried their state. The exceptions are like West Virginia, Montana, and Ohio, and John Tester and Sherrod Brown are going to have to win ticket splitters, a lot of them, if they're going to hold their seats.
Greg Giroux, one final question. Am I working next Sunday?
I sure hope not. I think, I can't imagine that the presidential election dragging that far along. I think we should get a result well before then, maybe even in a day or two. I think, the Senate, I don't think it would necessarily drag out. 2 years ago, the Senate was decided 4 days after the election. It's not clear that it'll be the case this time. I do wonder about the House. If the House is evenly divided, those California districts can take a week or more to count, but maybe we'll get an early decision there. Some of these toss-up races tend to break one way if there's the wind at the back for one party. And so if Kamala Harris or Donald Trump surges late, they could take the House with them as well.
Greg, what are you going to do after Ballots and Boundaries, after this election? What's Greg Giroux going to do? I mean, it's must-read.
Vacation.
I'm going to calculate, I hope, the presidential vote for all the states and the districts, so I can figure out how many districts voted for Kamala Harris and for a Democrat or Republican down ballot, or for Donald Trump and for a Democrat or Republican down ballot. It'll be very fascinating to see how these results play out.
Greg, thank you. Greg Giroux, for all of us at Bloomberg Surveillance, Team Surveillance, he is the foundation of our county-by-county, state-by-state analysis. Greg Giroux, Ballots and Boundaries, can't say enough about it at Bloomberg Government. Paul, what do you see?
I'm not sure how he gets that granular. How long does it take you to figure out
Work.
where all these work? You're right, and experience, because he knows it down to the district level and which district's in play and what that might mean. So the market's trying to figure out kind of what's in play here. We got a little bit of red on the screen here. The S&P's off 8 points, Tom. The Dow's off about 110 points. That's 1/4%, and the Nasdaq's off about 0.3%. So a little bit of a sell-off.
Stay with us. We're going to look at hydrocarbons here next, and then Bob Woodward will join us. Regina Mayer will join us here on $70 oil. Futures at -8, the VIX 22.67. Stay with us across the nation. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And the opening bell report brought to you by JP Morgan Asset Management. Stay informed on today's fastest growing investment vehicle with a new guide to ETFs. Visit jpmorgan.com/ETFs Insight to learn more. All right, the countdown to election day as we kick things off on this new trading week. We have a lot more economic data on tap, too, and the Fed also gears up for its two-day meeting on interest rates. We are off and running, so let's get right to it. We'll start with the S&P 500 right now. Well, it's back and forth right now. It's up just a fraction. The Dow down 16 points, and we have the NASDAQ right now down about 18 points, or about 0.1%. We have the two-year yield 4.14%, down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%. That's down 10 basis points. We have spot gold higher, $2,742 an ounce. We have Brent crude $74 a barrel, up more than 2%. WTI crude $71 a barrel. With currencies, we have the dollar weaker, Japanese yen, euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down nearly 1% at around 68,000. At the open, we're also checking with Nvidia as it gets ready to replace Intel in the Dow Industrial Average this week. We have Nvidia up more than 1%, Intel down nearly 2%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Paul called me up and he said, we got to do some market coverage the eve before the election. And we both agreed oil is like the place to be. Hugely popular with us. Regina Mayer, Global Head of Clients and Markets, KPMG, and far more of that, some serious geopolitical chops is well. Regina, does a gallon of gas play into this election?
It's pretty muted, this election, Tom. It's only $3.10 average across the nation, and that's more than 10% down year over year. So it's not having as fundamental a hit at the American wallet or pocketbook, and I haven't heard much talk about it at all this election cycle.
You're expert at the microeconomics and then folding it over into geopolitics. Is the microeconomics, the supply-demand of oil, fragile at this point because of geopolitics?
I really don't think it is, because the supply fundamentals are so strong. Let me just run through some of the things I'm watching. We're at record demand globally for hydrocarbons, but we have also supply that's keeping pace, and that demand is slowing down in its growth. So it's slower by 2/3 of what it was just last year. And the U.S. in particular is bumping up production. We've hit 13.3 million barrels per day, record production. 40% of the crude worldwide comes from the U.S., Saudi Arabia, and yes, Russia, still Russia. Iran only produces roughly 4 million barrels per day, and only 1.5 million barrels make it to the market. I think the market's looking to price in risk premiums, but the supply fundamentals are really driving the price environment today.
And Regina, you talked about the U.S. with its increasing production. How do U.S. producers interact with OPEC, if at all?
Well, they really don't interact that much with OPEC. I think they're really focused on what do their shareholders want to drive, and how do they drive good capital deployment and good economic shareholder-driven decisions. They understand what OPEC is planning, and we know that OPEC actually decided to delay unwinding of their cuts as they look at the market fundamentals, and they probably would prefer Brent to stay more strongly in the 70s. But WTI, it just in the last month has been trading with a number that starts with a 6, not a 7, definitely not an 8. So I think the supply issues are overweighing all other considerations.
Talk to us about Russian supply. Where is it today versus before the war? Where is it going? Because it doesn't seem like the West has shut down Russian oil.
Yeah, I think that's something that continues to be quite puzzling. They have voluntary cuts in the 250,000 to 500,000 barrel per day level. Those voluntary cuts, they're trying to make it seem like they're more concession oriented, but we believe that that's driven by what the market is doing, or what these sanctions are doing. But that still means a lot of their oil is getting to the market. I don't know exactly how it is and where it's going, but there's a lot of folks that need oil, and they're willing to buy at lower prices, and regardless of where it comes from.
Regina, do we have a national energy policy, or have we done the miracle? Remember peak oil, Paul? We're all going to die, peak oil. Or have we done it, Regina, without a national energy policy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's capital markets. It's the fundamentals of economics. It's the invisible hand that we've all learned
I'm
about.
shocked.
Supply. I know. Can you imagine? Supply and demand, economic drivers. It's not a policy issue. And I think you've seen some of the
Right.
CEOs that have been recently talking about earnings, basically saying, they've cut in half the cost of getting a barrel of oil out of the Permian. And so now in almost any price scenario, they
Right.
can turn a profit.
Would EV do, from your purview, with your experience, including Brussels, would EV do better in America against the China onslaught if EV was less regulated?
No, I don't think it's an issue of regulation, Tom. I think it's consumer preference. We still have a lot of range anxiety. The United States is a very, very large country. We still like our very large vehicles. I think that's why you've seen some of the U.S. automakers start to back off some of their all-electric claims, and that wasn't driven by regulation. As you well know, there is no EV mandate in the United States.
There's jargon there, Paul. Range anxiety is when Aaron Judge is coming in to catch a routine fly ball in the fifth inning. That's range anxiety.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Regina, talk to us about China and their impact on the demand for oil. How does the global oil world think about China these days?
Well, I think that is one of the big factors that the global oil world is looking at. China demand is definitely off pace, and we're hoping that the upcoming policy meeting means more stimulus to drive more activity in the Chinese economy, because we're all really dependent on that demand continuing to grow. But that's why the supply fundamentals are so strong. And frankly, the World Bank just issued a report. I won't say glut, but there's going to be more oil supply available in 2025, wow. And it will exceed demand.
I haven't heard that important emotional word in ages.
Yeah, glut. Yeah, exactly.
I try not to say it. Say it without saying it.
Right, exactly. So, Regina, as we think about 2025? I mean, is the expectation that we're kind of range bound here for the world of, WTI and Brent crude, or do you expect some major movement one way or the other?
I'm feeling really comfortable with where the price is, with the U.S. as an anchor producer. Remember, I said we are the single largest producer of oil worldwide, and we will continue to grow that. I know it feels very different if you sit in the United States in this election cycle, but we are the strongest, most stable, most consistent economy in the world, and we have the most stable regulatory regime.
I gotta translate this. Javier, this is great, Regina, having you on right now. Javier Blas is out. I gotta read this tweet verbatim. Yeah. Europe is experiencing the first serious Dunkelflaut of the 24-25 winter season, sending one-day electricity well above higher. A Dunkelflaut is a period of multiple consecutive days of low or minimal energy that can't be generated. So that's the great fear of the conservatives, Regina. If we have clouds, solar doesn't work. If there's no wind, the windmills don't work. Are we setting ourselves up for a global Dunkelflaut?
Okay, that's a great word. I'm going to have to put that in my vocabulary. That's why we need to continue to rely on fossil fuels, right? There is a consistency of generation, and there's a backstop that you can rely on. I do believe Europe really needs U.S. LNG, and so you see the folks in Houston that I hang out with quite worried about the LNG pause. I think that global LNG can help manage Dunkelflaut periods, and we need to make sure that we have stable electricity production.
Regina, thank you so much. Well-timed, Regina Mayer.
Yep.
Mayer with us with KPMG. She's global head of clients and markets there, and she gets the whole she worked with Stravitas in Brussels, I believe, ages ago.
Oh, that's a
doing
nice,
geopolitics. And, the Houston Astros, after they traded, they took everyone from Detroit, and they had a Dunkelflaut.
Dunkelflaut.
That's what the Houston Astros had this year, a Dunkelflaut.
How about the Detroit Tigers?
Only Javier. Where does Javier come up with this stuff?
Well, I'm just looking at his tweets for the price of oil, for cooking oil, the Spanish. Yeah.
Well, we're efforting. Seriously, folks, we're efforting Javier. He's been incredibly busy. Seriously, we're focused. We're trying to get Javier on to talk about the horrific flooding in his Spain. It's been just terrible. And there's schedule issues, and his people hate me, and the usual thing you can get. Markets are open. SPX futures flat, now open for trading, -14. The VIX out to a 23 level, 22.96. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Kamala Harris will be spending the entire final day of her campaign in Pennsylvania, while Donald Trump has 2 rallies there as well, along with stops in North Carolina and Michigan. The final polls before tomorrow's election may point to a slight momentum shift for the vice president. More on that from Bloomberg's Bill Ferries.
The last poll from New York Times, Siena, shows her leading in 5 of the battleground states. That includes Nevada, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Georgia, essentially tied in Pennsylvania and Michigan. But that's all still within the margin of error at this point. And to kind of throw a little bit of a wrench into the mix, there was this poll about Iowa that no one was really expecting, showing Harris with perhaps a 3-point lead in Iowa. Still, again, margin of error. But no one really had Iowa on their bingo card at this point. It's usually a safely Republican seat.
Bloomberg's Bill Ferries. The recurring storms in eastern Spain that led to massive flooding last week and killed over 200 people, mostly near Valencia. It's dumping rain on Barcelona. Today's downpour prompted authorities to suspend commuter rail service. Music titan Quincy Jones has died. Jones was a legendary composer, band leader, and record producer. Jones helped breathe new life to movie music with infusions of jazz and soul. His landmark 1989 album, Back on the Block, was chosen Album of the Year at the Grammy Awards. In 2012, Jones was honored with the ASCAP Founders Award. At his acceptance speech, he had this advice for future musicians.
Don't stop till you get enough, man. And I'm saying when it rains, get wet. When it rains, get wet. Work hard, work your butt off, and party hard. That's all I can say. And live your life.
Quincy Jones, who worked with such music greats as Michael Jackson and Frank Sinatra, was 91. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. On the markets here, a little bit of weight to the tape. VIX 22.65. Paul, I'm getting nothing from the bond market. Maybe it's after jobs and we're still figuring out 12,000 jobs.
Yeah, exactly right.
Affected.
Exactly right. We've got that jobs number came in. People kind of said take it with a grain of salt. So the market dealt with that. Now it's back to earnings. You get another earnings week here. We'll have some more data points, I think, for the market to digest. And then, of course, the Fed on Thursday, Tom. We'll hear from Fed Chairman Jay Powell. I think the market's still looking for that 25 basis point cut to the rates. And we'll see what they say on the guidance going forward.
Okay, we'll have to see. We welcome all of you across the nation on YouTube. Please subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. It's been a huge success for us. We're humbled by the reach of YouTube on your commute across this nation. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and, of course, all of our other distribution, 92.9 FM in Boston, Bloomberg 1130 in New York, and 99.1 FM in Bob Woodward's Washington. Joining us now on this election eve, Bob Woodward. It's 400 pages. The book is War. He's done many, many interviews on it. It is an insight into the Biden administration. I love what Robert Gates has said, who's served both political persuasions. On Woodward, he has an extraordinary ability to get otherwise responsible adults to spill their guts to him. Bob Woodward joins us on election eve. Bob, this weekend I discovered someone in the Keene household who had not seen All the President's Men. I tried to explain to them that I was interviewing Robert Redford on Monday. In that movie, you show up with Mr. Cady in the courtroom and you say, "My name's Bob Woodward. I'm from the Post, and I wanted to ask you how you happened to come on this case." The rudeness and direction of Redford's questions is appalling. It's shocking. Where did you learn to ask questions so abrupt, so direct, so as Robert Gates would say, they all spill their guts? Where did you learn that skill?
Well, look, that morning I got called to the courthouse. This was the morning of the Watergate burglary. I'd been covering night police for 9 months. And I go to the courthouse, and in come these burglars dressed in business suits. I had never seen a burglar in a business suit. I'd never seen a well-dressed burglar. And the lead burglar announced reluctantly to the judge that he'd worked at the CIA.
Yeah.
And what? CIA?
Right.
Business suits, 5 burglars, right. I mean, it was just like, oh, how do you not follow this story? And
right.
That's what I did.
I want to drive the conversation forward, Bob, on this election eve for a nation, some would say, fighting with its concept of democracy. In the epilogue to war, you have a brilliant 2 sentences. Often I have said, only half jokingly, that when I wake up in the morning, my first thought is, quote, what are the bastards hiding, unquote. So let's get 2 answers. What is Mr. Trump hiding this morning?
Well, Trump is making very clear who he is. And it's so visible. Let me just give you an example. I'm sorry, this may sound a little boring, but it's right at the heart of your question. The people Trump, when he was president, chose to be close to him, people who'd spent their lives defending our country. And let's look at what these people that Trump picked for key positions say about Trump now. Former Chief of Staff John Kelly, one of the most respected people in the military. This was Trump's selection to be the Chief of Staff at the White House. Kelly says of Trump, he's an idiot. It's pointless to try to convince him of anything. He's gone off the rails. We're in crazy town.
Bob, let me ask also to your wonderful quote, what are the bastards hiding? What is Vice President Harris hiding into this election?
Well, I think there are actually things that we don't know enough about. I had some time to work on how she deals with lots of issues, and it's very, let me get the right selection here, because she is tough. She is the person who goes and has meeting with Netanyahu, which I got the notes of, and really this was July 25th of this year, just a couple of months ago. And she could not be tougher with Netanyahu. And the notes show her saying the following in a closed meeting with Bibi Netanyahu. I'm disturbed by the humanitarian situation in Gaza. People are starving. There are 4,000 people per toilet. She really gets on him about this. And then she goes out in public and doesn't pull any punches and says, we cannot look away and become numb about what is happening in Gaza. And I will not be silent. I'm sorry. Yep. I'm giving a long answer.
No, it's excellent. Bob, stepping away here as we think about this election here, I can't help but wonder, thinking about your work, your earliest work back at the Washington Post, what has become of the GOP party? It seems like it is now clearly the party of one former President Donald Trump. Is that the new GOP going forward?
Well, it is at the moment. We'll see. I know lots of Republicans, and I know some who will say kind of public, I support Trump. I like Trump because he's the force in the party. But privately, it's thumbs down. They don't like Trump. Look, who is Trump? This is the question that people need to answer. He doesn't like advice. He doesn't like democracy, doesn't like the Constitution, doesn't like truth.
Joining us, Bob Woodward. We will continue with Mr. Woodward. We say good morning to all of you across the nation on this election eve. Under 400 pages, War by Bob Woodward is simply a look into the Biden administration, framed by Netanyahu and Putin, Zelensky, and of course, Vice President Harris. War. It's been out some time now. Paul Sweeney, pick it up with Bob Woodward, please.
Bob, tomorrow, obviously, Election Day. What will you be focusing on? Is it a state? Is it a certain candidate? Is it an issue? What are you going to be focusing on going into?
Well, I need to look at what happens, and all the polls say it's razor thin. So who knows? I hope and that people will look at the candidates, particularly. Right. He was president for 4 years. He has said some things in this campaign that really, and he really shows what's at stake in this election. He is a danger to democracy. Right. He is a danger to the United States. Why? Go back, my first interview with him was 35 years ago when he was a real estate king in New York City. And then, and even in interviews I did in the Oval Office with him when he was president, he's driven by instinct. He's got this idea that his instincts, what his gut feel is perfect. That's the way to go.
Yeah, but
you can't run a government on anyone's instincts. You need a team. You need some alternative views. And Trump is locked, as we know, locked into himself.
For the nation on this election eve, Bob Woodward joins us, of course, forever with the Washington Post. Bob, I had to do something for the youngest afterthought a while back. I had to look at her Vietnam paper and that. And like a lot of us, you were in NROTC at Yale, and I was doing another act out at the time at Boulder. I completely avoided reading or thinking about Vietnam, and I enjoyed Max Hastings, you know him well, from the Telegraph, and his one volume on Vietnam as well. The crucible of the modern Democratic Party is McGovern and HHH in 1972. The legacy that Vice President Harris...
HHS being Hubert Humphrey.
Hubert Humphrey, thank you. But the legacy that Harris carries forward, do you see her as a change agent for Democratic Party theology? Or is it, as the critics would say, Obama version 4?
Well, look, she's tough. She's going to president's school. She's very lucky, and in a sense, the country is very lucky that Biden, who was vice president once himself and didn't like to be cut out of things, he's made sure that she really is getting a graduate course in the presidency. She's at the meetings, the discussions, the debates. There are lots of signs of two qualities: independence and determination. And I think that that is a good thing. That's not a political judgment. It is what I was able to do in the reporting about what her course of going to president's school is. She's got a national security advisor named Phil Gordon, who is really experienced, really goes back a long time into the White House and the State Department and brings a lot of knowledge. Who's Donald Trump's national security advisor? His mouth. He will say whatever he wants, whatever springs in. That is the danger we face.
Bob Woodward, one final question. The dedication for my lifelong friend and reporting partner, Carl Bernstein. Do you guys talk a lot? Like, is there a Bernstein-Woodward take on where this nation is going right now?
Well, we do talk all the time, 3-4 times a week for sure. We saw each other recently. We did an appearance together just a few days ago in New York City. The question here is, who's Trump? Who's Harris? One important credential that Harris has is that Secretary of Defense Austin has a lot of respect for her. I describe new scenes in the book about what Austin has done and how he's been very tough with the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu, and there's some transcripts I have that are in the book, and you can see exactly what they said to each other. So
right.
There's hope, but to be a president and deal with this world situation now would stretch anyone, would stretch Dwight Eisenhower, would stretch. It is a very dangerous time. We got to get it right, and we got to be careful. And Trump is not a manager. Trump is not a person who really understands what the national interest is, because there is a blockage, and that blockage is he only cares about himself.
On this election eve, we continue with Bob Woodward. A few more minutes with Mr. Woodward in celebration of his book War and the 20 books or so before that as well. We welcome all of you across this nation on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and of course this new technology, YouTube. Paul, there was no YouTube.
No, there was not.
When the Watergate thing was going on.
No, exactly. Hey, Bob, if former President Trump were to lose this election, is there an heir apparent? Does Trumpism remain a political force? Is a J.D. Vance or someone like that out there in the wings?
I mean, that's that's speculation. I don't know. What is very interesting is to listen to Trump in the last couple of days. He's in a very sour mood, and I think it was yesterday or the day before, he said, I mean, this is the man who wants to be president again. He's very dark, very profane comments. And he said, this is a crooked country. Now imagine somebody, this is not a crooked country.
Right.
It may become one if he becomes president.
Bob Woodward, I got to ask one final question, and this is immense respect, and we get a huge response. Republicans hate you, Democrats love you. I get it, folks. Bob Woodward with
No, that's just not. I know lots of Republicans who don't march in line with Trump.
Well, I'm running out of time, Bob Woodward, but I got one final question with great respect for your career. Should newspapers endorse presidents?
Well, that's obviously up to them. At the Washington Post, there's a big controversy about the non-endorsement now. The Washington Post, I know very well for over 52 years, as I say. It's strong when the reporting is strong, as it has been now. I think it's been magnificent. And the editorial page should deal with the strength of that reporting. The editorial page needs to deal with reality, and the reporting is real and incredibly strong. To ignore it is to ignore reality. Not a good thing for any institution.
Right. Bob, thank you so much. Bob Woodward on this election eve across the nation, of course, forever with the Washington Post. The book is War. There it is, Paul, into the election, a passing of Quincy Jones. And I thought Michael Barr did a great job covering some of the hits.
Yes, absolutely.
Something a little less remote from Quincy Jones. he found amazing voice, James Ingram. We say good morning to all of you. Thanks for our team. We'll be here tomorrow, Election Day.